Let me know when we're live.
Well, great timing because we're now officially live to another episode of Lore Ramblings. Hey there, everyone. It's been a good while since we actually covered this book. A good long while.
It has been a very long time, but honestly, we've covered a lot of other good stuff in the meantime. This is kind of our good book refuge during the dark times. And it's a little sad that it is starting to come to an end. After this, we've only got 3 more chapters to go, and it is completely done. And at which point, I guess we'd move on to either Companion or Dark Eras 2 if we wanted to continue this.
Yeah,
But
what are you talking about, Dak? There's still Dark Eras too.
there's still Dark Eras Companion. Dark Eras 2 is much better than Companion. Mostly, but Dark Eras 2, well, not really actually. Dark Eras 2 has some like absolutely standout settings, and it has some where I'm just like, meh, absolutely meh. Uh, that said, this is one of the better ones in the book, and I think this is one of the ones that actually sold the book for a lot of people. Is this Promethean, uniquely among basically all game lines, never got a setting book when it came to, well, anything like Promethean's one of those weird games where they technically had a setting, sort of like Changeling, but not really.
And
But it
actually,
also
let
didn't
me
have anything.
show what we're covering. Handful of Dust, a Promethean tale set during the Great Depression.
Yeah,
And he is completely correct, because this is first edition Chronicles of Darkness, and at this point, Promethean did not actually have setting books. Some of
Promethean's
the
never really had it. I mean, you could argue that Changeling had no. Changeling got Victorian Lost. The only other line that I can think of that didn't get an explicit like city splat book, I think this time was Geist, and Geist at least got the book about the underworld to play around with. Promethean was basically left in with nothing, no timeline books, nothing else. It was a very short run book, game line. It was very much a cult popular hit because, quite frankly, first edition Promethean was very hard to play and hard to find players for because vampire exists, werewolf exists, mage exists.
the
Like,
biggest problem that Promethean has is that you have to kind of be prepared to do kind of long form, rambling, loneliest man journeys.
you have to be prepared to really seriously roleplay. Honestly, with Promethean, I think that that's where the game shines the most is when you
It's
have people
partly that,
invested into the
and
roleplay.
then it has the same problem that, well, let's be fair, in Old World of Darkness, the same problem was after Werewolf and Vampire, people didn't give a shit.
Because that's the other thing. It's like it's pretty easy relatively to sell people on a power fantasy of being a vampire or a werewolf or a mage, somewhat on being a changeling or a sin eater or whatever else. But being a Promethean, quite frankly, is fucking suffering. Like, yes, you're a super powerful being, but you're also going to destroy everything and everyone around you if you stay put too long. Uh,
Yes, the big three. Name a more iconic trio than Count Dracula, John Talbot, and what's his name? Fruity
Merlin.
Frankenstein guy. You know yeah. It's like the name. It's not Blueberry. It's the Fruity Pebbles
uh, Count
Frankenstein guy.
Count Chocula, Frankenberry, and
I don't think they ever did a
God,
werewolf themed cereal, which is
they
really
never
weird.
did, which is a bit of a surprise. They did Blueberry though, which was their blueberry flavored one. My dad actually worked for General Mills for a while, so I have I have a fun amount of like little knickknacks from when he was in there,
But
including
yeah, the biggest problem for what I think kills the movement for Frankenstein's monsters are, yeah, the other ones you can pretty easily explain to people. Like with vampires, you're a dead corpse that tries to imitate what it had in life.
basically. Have you seen Interview with the Vampire?
Yeah, it's basically that.
It's basically that.
Werewolf is
Werewolf.
border patrol where you hunt ghosts and or people.
Yeah, old werewolf a little bit different, but new werewolf is
Old
very much.
werewolf is you punch out Captain Planet villains.
Old werewolf is we're the Power Rangers fighting Captain Planet villains and also going crazy and eating people occasionally. Like it's relatively simple to describe kind of the overarching plot of Old Werewolf. It's pretty
Both
easy to
aspects of Mage are basically the Matrix you're essentially fighting against.
not necessarily in second, not necessarily in
To
Awakening. It's
simplify it.
to simplify it. Even
Yes,
to
that's the
simplify it, it's like I mean, simplifying Mage is fucking impossible. I'm sorry.
but you can at least do it. With
You can basically
Promethean,
say you're a wizard, Harry, and then there you go. There's your
yeah, that's
game.
basically it. With Promethean though, it's you're one of the many types of Frankenstein's monsters, and
You
you're basically Bruce Banner in the 1970s show, The Loneliest Man on Earth, as you're wandering a world that rejects. It's a lot harder to simplify.
I mean the best way to describe it, if you're trying to go to somebody who's in nerdy circles and has read is that it's a lot like playing a golem in Discworld. Right? If you know the Discworld series, there's a group of beings called golems that are literally powered by fire, have magical scrolls, all this other stuff. It's very similar to playing something like that, except not.
The only thing I remember, because I've never actually had the chance to read Discworld, sadly,
Yeah.
I do know that at one point the golems tried to, I think, set up a union, and they won the cases, and they apparently went mad because they didn't have enough to do.
No, it's a little bit different than that. What
It was
happened
something
is
like
that
that.
the golems tried to make their own king, and that king went crazy because they shoved way too much in its head. Um, because they were trying because the thing about golems in Discworld is that they can be modified to be able to speak and the words and all this other stuff. They're very they're interesting. I like golems in Discworld a lot, but that's we're getting off on a tangent
No, that's
already.
fine. So, Handful of Dust. The basic concept of Promethean is you're Pinocchio wanting to become a real boy,
You want to
but
become the real
but
boy, but to
life
become the real
itself is
boy,
telling you to go fuck off.
yeah, but to become a real boy, you have to experience everything good and bad about being human.
So that means that the entire movie Pinocchio, even the part where he's being an awful shit on the Devil Island, you need to do
100% what
that.
a Promethean is going to have to do. A Promethean has to you're going to have to do horrible things as a Promethean just to survive sometimes and just to understand people. I mean, it's a completely valid interpretation for a Promethean to take people and rip the absolute ever living shit out of them into their base components, to look at to see what makes them tick, and then to model themselves after that sort of thing. So a Promethean that legitimately carves up people in order to understand how the body works internally, in order to try to figure out what that might have to do with Azoth residents, is a completely valid interpretation for a Promethean. It's a Promethean that probably won't complete the journey, but it's a Promethean that is making an attempt in a weird, fucked up way to do it, and might actually have to do that anyway to make itself another, Promethean.
It literally is required for, I believe, shit, I
To
think it's actually all of them.
It is required. It is required for a Promethean to make another Promethean, and one of the easiest ways to do that is with human corpses. So, you know,
By the way, Dark Sun has asked, is this the second edition book? No, Dark
no,
Era is
this is Dark Eras
traditionally.
is in a weird position. Dark Eras is it came out. I guess the best way to call Dark Eras is like 1.5.
It
It came
came out
out
right
just
during the
before the second
reformulation.
edition. Yeah, it came out just before second edition for a bunch of things. But it kind of uses the second edition assumptions with a lot of other uh, things. Like there's certain game books where it is very much firmly second edition, where it's like, yes, for Vampire it is
The
second
way they
edition.
handle Vampire in this, yes, it's traditionally second edition since that's the one that first came out. Other times they
Change
bring
things
up, remember,
wonky,
one of the settings they mentioned skinwalkers, which you don't see outside of first.
right? And basically, it's an update for those rules into second edition. Honestly,
Oh, it's
the
not. It's they made it right when it was transitioning, and you can kind of just make it work.
yeah, I mean it's an update to make them functional. It's not an update to fully update them. It's you know
Accident.
more like we need to make these things work and we find them cool. So here's some rules to just port them over a little bit easier. Go nuts.
So they couldn't
Then
read a textbook? I don't know about that. I don't know what in particular you're asking for when you say that.
oh, they're like an anatomy textbook is what they're talking about
I mean,
for Promethean. I mean,
you
yes,
could,
but also no. I mean, it,
but there's a difference between the academic and the experiential.
and for Prometheans, it's almost all about experience. So yes, for Frankenstein to tie down a homeless man and cut him open to start the process of making another Promethean is very much a possibility. Where he takes a couple of people and he legitimately starts disassembling them into component parts so that he understands how to do it when he has to do it for, making another one of him.
It's also used in certain refinements. I don't remember them by heart. I think the one I'm thinking of is Cuprum, where you refine your own body by actually looking at how theirs functions to make yours function more efficiently.
Yeah, that could also be part of it too. You could also legitimately be looking at like, okay, how does a heart actually work? Because I want to pump azoth like I would, blood.
Yeah, instead of using this weird electric motor thingy.
Yeah, like I want to scout. And for Frankenstein's, it might legitimately be, I just need a new heart. I'm sorry, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I got my body ripped open. Kind of need it.
Yeah, kind of need to patch myself back up together again. Sorry.
So yeah, during the 1930s, essentially this horrible event known as the Great Depression, caused by unregulated stock market situation and a bunch of other essentially buying practices and lending practices.
Basically, this is the period of very low government regulation in any sort of financial industries. We had more
Combined
than
with
we did,
businesses' usual propensity to slice their own throats for the penny today, ignoring the dollar for tomorrow.
and combine that with kind of the nature of how banking was working in this era for lending money. And there's actually a bunch of money that's been lent out because businesses are doing well enough to borrow money, a lot of money. Now combine that with a lot of people that are running Ponzi schemes at this time, because this is where Ponzi schemes start out, is the man named Charles Ponzi.
So
Uh,
we're going into that. Okay, so here's some cool facts. It's only been about 40 years since the first United States paper currency was widespread actually accepted.
yes,
It's fairly new. Two, this is still the era of metalism, even
yeah,
though fiat currency isn't actually a thing until after this period.
yeah. Basically, we immediately, one of the things that the Great Depression did, and this is one of the things, if you're an economist, that this is a good thing that they did this, is the Great Depression showed that tying your currency to a metal really is not the best way to do things. You can very much argue that a lot of the reason the Great Depression lasted as long as it did was because the government could not adjust the value of the money. It was so solidly pegged they couldn't do anything with it.
Well, because you only could, without debasing your own currency, you can only go so far without that. You have to. That's where the fiat came in. You basically leverage trust in replacement of it, and that's why. That's
That's
how you're
why,
able.
because it's basically taking out the illusion that gold has any value, right?
Because
It's
at the end
basically
of the
saying
day, we only label gold valuable because A, it looked pretty, and B, it kind of rare.
rare-ish.
It kind
It's
of
also
rare.
that you can hammer it into a bunch of different forms, and it's useful for a few things, but it's not like a super useful metal. Honestly,
But
there's a lot of things
this is
that.
the era of we're still on the gold standard. There are
Yep.
people in this time period who are like, we should go back to the bimetallism era.
We should go back to a silver standard,
No, bimetal, you
which,
use both,
yeah, there's a lot of people
which was
pushing that right now,
rejected
actually.
because if you're curious, less than 20 years prior, when they still used silver in some areas, recessions and crises became, I think, an every 7-year occurrence.
Yeah, early U.S. economic policy can best be described as a absolute fucking roller coaster of problems.
Of panic.
Yeah, so anybody that's trying to say like, oh, the Fed is printing all this money, and you've got to remember that the comparison of okay, we're dealing with some inflation now compared to, oh God, everything is changing in value incredibly rapidly, and we're having rapid deflation, followed by rapid inflation, followed by debasement of currency, followed by economic crashes, followed by nobody being able to trade money because it's all
Our
not
money has
centrally
fallen
regulated.
apart in value so hard it took one of the world's richest men to single-handedly sacrifice half his fucking fortune to keep us going.
Yeah,
The
like that's the
Rockefellers
kind.
had to sacrifice like half of his money. I think
Yeah,
it was in 1893 he did it. And then
yeah,
1907, I think Standard Oil did it again.
yes. Like you have to understand. The nature of the U.S. monetary system in this era. Anybody that's saying like we should go back to the good old days does not actually understand what the good old days implied or had happened. The good old days was a time when you could roll into a town with a bunch of gold-plated bricks, pretend to be a bank, take everyone's money, and leave.
Oh yeah, and if you're wondering, the very first Ponzi scheme was created by Charles Ponzi, 1908.
Yes, and he managed to run it for about what 20 goddamn years.
Uh, no. His first scheme actually lasted 4 years. I think they only caught him in the early 20s because he did it about 2 or 3
I
more
think it was in the
times.
late 20s that they caught him. Like,
Yeah, he was able to get away with like 3 or 4 different iterations of that scam. The last one I think
yeah,
lasted almost 10 years
yeah, like you have to
because he got
understand that
better each
because
time.
yeah, you have to understand that the like this is the time of the financial huckster. Like if you can fake it, you can make it. Like I
This is
I
the
hate
era
to
where in 1903 scientists were aware by God, radium kills you. And you have people selling on the streets, here's a pill made of radium so you can get immortality. Here,
yes.
shine this radioactive material on your baby's face. It'll make their skin shine better.
Yeah, there's a lot of that sort of shit running around. Like this is the time of the huckster, 100%.
There's like
Uh
18 different recipes for laudanum. All of them use heroin or some form of cocaine.
yeah, I mean this is one of those things where people are like the New Deal and well it's like no,
It,
this
it,
was very
it takes a
necessary.
weird person to try to shit on the New Deal. Who are
It's
you?
called being a Republican usually.
Who are you, Calvin Coolidge?
Calvin Coolidge, no, we're talking like basically the entire modern Republican Party, but that's a different conversation in terms of
I think
like, are
that's
you?
a gross. I think that you're grossly misrepresenting them because even after the 30s, they kind of were forced to just take the pill.
They're forced to accept it, but they're still salty about it to this fucking day.
That's
Uh,
that's Robert Taft's fault, and you know it.
yeah,
He was the weirdo who really fucking hated it.
it's really funny because it's like
It was like
when
basically, if you're wondering, and any opposition like or criticisms to FDR, there's some stuff he genuinely did, like stacking the court. But any
or tried to
economic
do, yeah.
complaints is a one-man war waged by Robert Taft.
Robert Taft and a bunch of really stupid economists that don't have
Oh
any
yes,
idea
the
of what the
Vienna
fuck they're
School
talking
of,
about.
of
Yeah,
morons,
yeah, where it's
who
like the
then
government
created the
shouldn't get involved
Chicago
whatsoever.
School.
Yeah, the government shouldn't get involved whatsoever in this sort of thing. Where it's like,
Thank you,
m-
Friedman. Very cool.
thank you, Friedman. Very cool. I will enjoy my 5-year collapse cycles and my free falling wealth. Where it turns out that the only people that get any wealth are the ones that keep capital through these crashes, which turns out to be the already fucking wealthy.
So here's the other thing, just to rock back in. So the Great Depression is caused by lesser regulatory bodies. In fact, this is actually one of the very out of all of the
There's like
many things Franklin
4
Delano
stock
Roosevelt
markets.
did, his first term easily was his best term out of all 4 of them.
Yeah, I mean, let me put it like this:
In 100
the
days, he did more than most presidents do with 2 full terms.
yeah, he really went
He
fucking
managed to
hard.
ram through, I think it was something like an act, less than, what was it, an act every 3 days?
Now, to be fair, he also had basically supermajority in Congress. He could get shit done, and he did. Uh,
And yeah, he didn't fuck around. He was just like, no, we're doing this now.
we need
Conservation
to
Corps to get people on there. People are running to the banks.
we
We
need
need
bank
to close
holidays.
them down and make sure
Yeah,
that they got their money. We'll pin it on the government's trust. I will talk to the people, make them believe that things are bad, but it'll eventually get better. Just calm
yes.
down.
There's
and we'll
also
pay back anything that the banks still
the
owe you.
sort of social security, because he realized that the most vulnerable people in society are the ones that really, really do need some
Now
money in
that
order
one
to
got
survive.
passed easily for the greatest reason being things like the bonus army,
Yes.
where
So
where less than a year, to give you an idea, less than a year, for those of you wondering, less than a year into his presidency, into his presidency, the year before he was in it, a bunch of World
yeah,
War One veterans who essentially had their entire life savings destroyed. It was something like 50,000 poor bastards marched on Washington because they were promised bonuses because of their service in the war near the end. They never got them. And well, the fucked thing is Hoover was trying to negotiate. MacArthur decided, no, I'm going to make myself a legend by beating up these freaking hippies.
yeah. Let me put it like this:
Sent the
MacArthur.
army.
There's a lot of reasons to dislike MacArthur. Almost all of them are valid, and I will not budge on that.
To give you an idea, the reason he went to the Philippines, it's not because it was his favorite place in the world. It is partially that, because he also gained a lot of kickbacks and corruption money from the
Yeah, it
Filipino
was also
government.
because no one wanted him in the fucking states.
Oh no, he was exiled there literally because of how he handled. Because he killed like a couple dozen and badly injured several hundred by suppressing. It was literally starving, starving
Starving
people
veterans.
led by an old man who basically was like, "That's real shit. I was a Civil War vet." Like he was really old. He was Coxley. He was really old. He's like, "That's real shit. I was a Civil War veteran. I got my payment." Also, you know what we should do? Old people shouldn't be left to starve in the streets.
MacArthur's like, "Lol, Lamau, we say yes," and just fucking torches the place. Yeah,
He,
there's
he
there's a very
legitimately
good
sent an
reason.
entire division of the United States Army to beat the shit out of some poor veterans.
Yeah, you can understand why
That's
MacArthur
why
was
I hate.
not
That's why I hate Dugout Doug.
you can understand that MacArthur was not popular with the men after this. And he would not be until like the Second World War when anyone would give a shit about him again. And
Oh,
even
well,
then,
don't forget he left his entire command to die for his own ego in Corregidor.
yeah, not
Piece of
only
shit.
that, but he
Piece
fucked
of
up the defense
fucking shit.
plans. Oh, MacArthur is like the most gigantic fuck up ever.
The only time he did something remotely correct was Japan.
No, no, Japan he still fucked up slightly. The
By comparison, though.
by comparison, sure. I mean, he was okay in Korea until he wasn't because he was a retard.
Well, no, no,
The
no. From okay, I hate him, but I'll at least grant him in the concept from the point of view of what he was dealing with. He saw the Chinese legitimately swarming themselves by the tens upon tens of thousands. This is clearly a war gone beyond its borders. So, from the point of view, his suggestions of tactical weapon usage
the
does
the
make
re-
sense.
it does, but the problem is that he's the one that triggered it by not stating to them that he's going to stop at the Yalu. They
Well,
were asking him, "Hey, are you going to stop at the Yalu? Are you going to stop at the Yalu?" And he's ignoring the Chinese requests of, "Can you please clarify your intentions?
there's one
Please."
more really hilarious part. I think he also got caught like having dinner with a former like member of the Republic of China too during that time.
It basically put like the Chinese are saying, if you get too close here, like we will go over the river. Please tell us what you're fucking doing. And, and
You are going to stop, right, MacArthur? And you just hear MacArthur grumble about
commie,
ending Truman's
commies.
mistake.
Yeah, he's just ranting about commies, and then yeah, like there was a
I'll show that bitch Stillwell how you actually fix it, China.
yeah. Then we get then of course it's suddenly like all of the gains that he had made erased because he can't fucking deal with a goddamn light infantry assault because MacArthur.
No. Remember, they were ordered to retreat. They were
They were
ordered to
ordered
retreat.
they were ordered to retreat
But you
way
forget
too late.
that doesn't matter. Do you want to know they were outnumbered? What was it, 5-1? What was it, 250 dead per one American soldier?
That was only in a couple of areas. The main issue that they had was that they decided to first off, MacArthur
Remember,
had
China
spread out.
overprophesizes Incheon. They do. They really overprophesize because it's like the one time they the U.S. technically lost on a field fight, and that was mainly due to strategic order. Yeah, back
Yeah,
to the Dust Bowl. We're 20 years
we're
ahead.
back. Yeah, we're 20 years ahead. But seriously, no, like there was no fallback plan. Like you, God damn it, Doug.
MacArthur is the worst strategist
He's
I've
the
ever seen.
worst. He's genuinely the fucking worst, and I hate him.
I don't know.
If
I don't know
if I
because
was in
there's
a room
also
with
Lloyd
Hitler,
Frednall, dude.
if I was in a room with Hitler and MacArthur, and I had a gun with only 3 bullets, I'd shoot MacArthur twice than Hitler.
No, other way. Other way.
No, no, I mean I'm still shooting both of them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But you targeted the first. You targeted the wrong person first. So anyway, as mentioned, deregulation, economy, ate shit. Here's the other thing, though. At the same time, a gigantic climactical disaster also happened due to agricultural usage of land.
Basically, this was something that people actually saw coming too, and were trying to warn about, and
Yeah,
they
because
weren't
soil
listened
erosion
to.
was noticed as early as like the 1880s.
Yes, it was noticed as being a problem. Now, part of the problem is that there is no indication to the farmers that you need to stop over farming the soil. Now, this might seem like natural these days, but back then, there's no government subsidies to allow farmers to not farm certain
On
areas.
top of that, this is not the time of This is not the time of like ConAgra. This is not the time of Monsanto. It's not the time of these big hyper conglomerized agricultural corporations.
Yeah, it's a bunch
When
of
we're talking
smaller scattered
farms,
farms.
it's you got Jethro and Jezebel and their 18 kids. 5 of them died in childhood, but as you do. There's 13 kids, and they manage about, I don't know, 50 acres because it's a big family. Backbreaking work. And every year that soil gets a bit thinner, it gets a little less productive. And then one year, the skies turn dark. And at first they're panicking because they thought it was a locust swarm. But no, it's just the topsoil being blown away and away, leaving nothing to really grow with. There's no nutrients left in that soil. Well, you just say goodbye to their livelihoods. There's no subsidies, there's no relief. And that's how stories like The Grapes of Wrath was written. A lot of
Yep.
farmers had to flee.
Yep, and basically put, the other thing is that because of the depression, there's more emphasis of need to get food and sell it because you need money. Well, that means that it gets worse and worse and worse because there's people that are pushing soil that shouldn't be pushed even further. It's just
On top of
abs.
that, there's a deflationary spiral. This is something people forget. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
it sounds really cool. You can you can go to like a place and get a hamburger for what, 10 cents?
yeah. The problem is that deflation is actually arguably worse than inflation, especially once it
It depends
spirals.
on earning rate. In this case, it spiraled down to the point farmers were going homeless despite the fact they were trying to do bumper crops out of desperation.
Yeah, like they couldn't afford to pay back any loans that they took because the stuff that they sold was worth less. Which again, it's just
Things
this.
were so
It's a
bad that it was a bipartisan. This is one of the very few times bipartisan support was made for the agriculture. Yes, the Republicans
the
actually
reason.
agreed with it.
Yeah, the reason why the Farm Bill exists is because of the Great Depression. It is one. It
It
is
is
the
the one
primary
of the
reason.
very few times you'll ever see both parties go, "This is fucked," and they both agree to put this in the law for two different reasons. From the Republican point of view, it was to save the small farmers and businessmen because that's what they represented. They represented the small, like, yeah, it's more blue collar, so that's more of the Democrat at the time, but they still wanted you to make money. They were the party of business. You can't really make money if you don't have the opportunity to, hence the subsidies. And same with the Dems. They wanted to help the poor man, the little, the worker.
Small farmers, because like, holy
That was one
shit.
of their axes way back when. This was called the Fifth Coalition for a reason. It was the poor factory worker, the farmer, uh, Catholics, because the Republicans basically pissed away their support from them for a while, good long while.
Yeah.
If you're wondering,
Then
it's because the Republican Party started as a weird nativist party that legitimately
yeah,
hated Catholics. It's really weird.
the
One of the
Republican Party,
funniest
like the
first platforms is they also wanted to destroy Mormonism. That was one of their political platform planks.
God, I wish they did.
Mormonism delenda est.
Just please destroy Utah. I want it to happen. Just drop, tie me to the rocket and fire me at Salt Lake City. I'm ready.
I'm just envisioning you like cheering like Major Kong from Doctor Strangelove above Salt Lake City.
In any case, the
Dust Bowl combined with the financial collapse, combined with deflation, leads to many people dying from the topsoil smoke and from
basically,
starvation.
yeah. Remember this. The breadbasket basically suffered starvation. People forget something here, which is that even in the age of mechanized agriculture, you can get massive famines if the soil quality gets this bad.
And in this case,
Um,
it's a side. Basically, the prairies were so very lush because it had a shitload of topsoil from all the grasses that would dry and essentially turn into peat.
yeah, and then they burned through all of it in like a 100 years,
Because they did
essentially.
do
Like,
things like fertilize. They did use fertilizers, but you can only kind of keep the pace so well. In
yeah,
areas that were settled earlier, they experienced some degree of that, but they were able to get around it. That's why I think parts of Chicago and Illinois, basically the easternmost portions, and I think a couple of the most western areas were not affected. But as a whole, no, just because of the rate of colonization and just the rate of introducing stuff and the change to the environment, yeah, massive ecological catastrophe.
yeah.
A-
Then
And not
then we
just
get
for like nature, I mean like everyone was fucking starving. It awful. And then on top of that, the low prices killed off the farmers left
yeah. Uh,
because you're not making money from growing wheat.
you're not, and for that matter, it gets just kind of like into the really weird nature of really everything in this time. Because as we go down here, they're talking sort of about that it's just this absolute nightmare on the plains, quite
Hey Jim,
honestly.
wow, what did I walk into? First thing you hear is something about Utah and Salt Lake City.
Look, it is the proper and right thing to do. Any honestly, we should just destroy Arizona and Utah. They should not exist as entities at all. Like it is an affront to the nature of the United States to have fucking cities in the middle of the goddamn desert. Just get rid of them, please.
What are you talking about? It's built on the Great Basin's aquifer. It has a reason to exist.
Okay, Salt Lake, but Phoenix deserves to be nuked, inshallah. Like, I
No, that one also
Phoenix,
has a minor tactical reason. It's one of the few areas you could reliably build a railroads from east to west. It
even
shouldn't be
then,
as
like,
large as it
it
is,
shouldn't be as large as it is.
but
Phoenix is a testament to man's fucking hubris.
no, that's Las Vegas.
No, Las Vegas is a testament to casinos, basically.
If you're
Casinos,
wondering, what
gambling, and the
happened
mob.
was I was talking about some of the weird early platforms of the Republican Party, which actually were anti-Catholic and anti-Mormon way back when.
They were kind of the second coming, a little bit of the populist party, I guess, but no, it
Well,
wasn't
they
the populist party
started that,
later.
but they also absorbed elements from. They were originally the Federalists. They became Whigs. It was the concept of the white collar small businessman.
Yeah, the early Republican Party is a very weird, weird party.
Because
That they
you had
even
you
got
had
Lincoln to
hardcore
run for them.
abolitionists, religious freedom advocates, except for the ones I mentioned, uh, American nativists,
You also had Methodists, I
strong
think.
Methodist streak.
It was like, again, it was pretty weird, but that was mostly because of the abolitionist stuff.
But as we mentioned, so here's the thing: the Great Depression and Dust Bowl, it didn't just rock human society; it also rocked the supernatural world. And out of the
Because
communities that really took it, the ones that actually kind of took it the best in the way and the worst because they're used to it were the Prometheans. Because to them, this is just what their existence is.
for Prometheans, this is honestly one of the more interesting periods for them because it's like everyone is suddenly in this area is almost forced to live like they did
Yeah, and on
and
top of
do.
that, it's like the wasteland writ large.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of
The big themes
there's
of
not a lot of
this
times
are
like this
hope and despair.
because the thing of the matter is that for a lot of these people the migration forced by this by this ecological catastrophe actually ended up being beneficial in the long run. This A lot of these people would end up moving towards California, out towards like
I wouldn't
Chicago.
necessarily say that was a bonus to either of those cities due to land value problems, but yeah, fair enough.
You know what I mean? Like there was a basically a scattering of the population towards the coasts again, which did in fact help on later on in industrial development and agricultural concentration in certain areas. There's a lot of beneficial aspects to people moving around that, despite the disaster, is kind of the truth of it. Like it
Although
did
on a
force
more
farmers to become
personal
more
level,
efficient.
because you're because this is kind of a weird societal experimentation thing. Um, I would say from a more personal point of view, there's
It
hope.
sucked.
No, there's hope because this is the time of Steinbeck, and you see this with like the Grapes of Wrath, where
Yeah.
they're hoping. Yes, their homestead completely failed, but in California, maybe they could get a job as one of the many longshoremen alongside the San Diego Naval Dockyard. Maybe they can work in some of the variety of orchards because they're starting to experiment with stuff like they're building like massive nut orchards and other more exotic fruits and vegetables and stuff.
Citrus too. A lot of citrus.
So maybe they could strike it bigger there. Like they could sell bumper crops there if they wanted to go farm. Like there's these hopes and dreams that they might be able to fulfill because that's kind of what they're relying on. They don't have much at the moment. And
Yeah.
that's where the despair comes in because converse that hope, you get stuff like I'm going to use Steinbeck again. You get stuff like Of Mice and Men where you have your hope, but it gets shot in front of you. Where just situation means you can't really escape it. Yeah, Lenny and George
Yeah.
had their dream of having a farm that owned rabbits that maybe they could sell the fur on, but that dream doesn't amount to anything
That
anymore.
was mostly George.
Yeah, but like Lenny wanted the rabbit. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, their dream died.
Yeah, it just didn't work out.
And that's the kind of two-faced element of this. That's the theme of this. And it really, really resonates with Prometheans because it represents their hope that they can too be this resilient piece like humans, but so many of them would also fall into that despair, that torment. This is their experience, and they're seeing humans in mass kind of deal with it in a way that's very familiar to them. This is seeing how humans. This is a. It's a fucked up thing, but it's like an excellent learning experience on human nature for them.
Hmm. It's great.
Remember at this point in time, Funny Mustache Man was in power, Stalin existed, and Japan declared war on China. In this order, this is around the early 30s. Funny Mustache Man was actually only a major political player. The Communist Party of Germany was also still a thing at the time. Stalin was in power. He has not banned Trotsky yet from the party, although he's on his outs. And the
Trotsky, I think, has
Kwangtung
already left
Army
the
of
country.
Japan has already ignored the Japanese civilian government, and the variety of attempted military coups have begun. This is also Mussolini's war against malaria time because he did a big war
Yeah.
against the malaria and mafia.
And honestly, it's also the time where we get like some of the really, 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 really wonky art out of the Italian accelerationists.
It's essentially kind of that really early depression. It's that early 30s. It's around the time that
Yeah.
Roosevelt starts his program, because that's about when the Dust Bowl began.
Yeah. Then we get there's a fun sidebar here of Talking to Talk, which they give an actual link to a couple of sites for here you go for slang in the 30s. Have
Yeah,
fun with that.
yeah, like informants. The term narc was a thing. They can use terms like pricey, raunchy. Slang is a bit. It's interesting because it's so similar, but there's a little bit.
There's some differences. You're not going to hear somebody saying that that shit is lit fam, no cap.
You can't say T-pose to assert dominance.
You can't, because the idea of a T-pose, while it exists, does not have any relevance to asserting dominance, and will not until the conception of 3D modeling. So, uh, in any case, the main issue is quite simple. The plows were not when they plowed into the topsoil way too much, it ended up exhausting the soil and exhausting how compacted it was. So grasses died, trees died. There wasn't any of this. You got dirty rain, black snow, bunch of dust. It went to hell.
Mainly
And
because the soil and climate. When they went there, they originally were thinking the climate was pretty darn similar to Europe, so that just let's use the same tactics. They didn't account for the fact that the weather and climate was drier than it was on the East Coast.
it's drier and hotter in the Midwest than it is basically anywhere else. Well, anywhere in Europe, really. The despite the agricultural soil being fantastic, the climate is actually not exactly what I'd call ideal for a lot of the sort of style of farming that you would have in Europe at the time. It's just not efficient to do it year over year over year because you start to get into the issues like soil degradation and basically put, there's entire agricultural colleges and courses that you can definitely find that would actually explain this way better. But the simplest answer to this is that they fucked up. They fucked up bad,
Yeah,
and it
because
was a
they didn't
compounding
expect it.
error of yeah, it was a compounding error of generations. And this is in the time when agricultural sciences aren't exactly like the sort of like
There was a science there. There were agricultural colleges. They were a thing.
there were,
It's
but they
just they didn't quite understand the whys and mechanisms. To give you an idea, they understood at this time cotton is a nutrient drainer. They know that. They're aware of that. They've seen it and
They
how
know
it.
what yeah, they know that nitrogen has something to do with it. They know that there's like these other things that they have with chemicals and whatnot.
But they
There's a
don't
lot
know
of
the why.
yeah, they don't know the why is something that will take a few more decades to really figure out. It's in the 40s and 50s that we really get into like with the dawn of really mechanized agriculture
And
that
it
we really
partially
start
was due to just how the hell did this very profitable and
like what the
very
fuck
rich
happened.
area, like how did, because to give you an idea, I recommend at some point looking at images of the Great Dust Bowl. Areas that used to be amazingly beautiful and lush, they literally look like a frickin' wasteland. You could use them actually for wastelands for Prometheans, or as the effects of what Pentex is doing if you're doing a Werewolf the Apocalypse. It is horrifying. You'll see houses
It
like
is.
choked in dust.
It is, and like, what's the answer? The answer to this is, well, they didn't know really 100% of the time. There were people who had an idea. There was some vague ideas that did we overfarm this place?
Did we
Is this a
overfarm? Like
natural?
they didn't know that the soil was the way it was. Like it didn't occur to them.
They had ideas, but not like nothing concrete. In any case,
Like they knew fixation, but like how? And they didn't realize that things like wind blow and shit like that. To give you an idea, the concept of soil being blown away, they knew about that, but
but it wasn't like shelter belts weren't really a thing. Like there weren't these.
they would traditionally do lines of trees. Like it was known that it works, but not the why and how.
Yeah, like no more like shelter belts weren't exactly as common. Then you have like You didn't have any of like the native, so like grass is always like kind of coming back into certain areas. Like they wouldn't let that regrow in certain areas or keep areas like that. There's a lot of
Just
things that go
practices
into the
that
soil.
would work in any other, that would work fine in many other areas of the world, but doesn't work here.
Doesn't work here. And well, there we go. So the fact is that
A lot of
a
people
lot
had
of
to
the
uproot and leave.
yeah, a lot of farmers had to completely leave. Agricultural communities had to completely leave because the farmers couldn't farm. So why stay where you can't make any money?
And this is where, if you ever look at period pieces, this is where, and actually it has echoes for decades afterwards. This is where the drifter kind of stereotype comes from.
Yeah,
Just people that are trying to escape from their past or just trying to find something new. A lot of that can be seen here because you might have been the farm, the local big farmer in a small town of a couple hundred folk back in Omaha, Nebraska, or not in Omaha, like in Nebraska. But now you're part of the starving masses all the way down in the San Joaquinto Valley in California. And that's after hundreds of miles, essentially trying to and hoping that you make enough money to feed your family or yourself if you don't have one.
yeah. Now on top of
This
all
is this
this,
is
right?
the era where an entirely new type of sandwich was invented called the onion burger, native to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Beef
Now
prices essentially collapsed, and farm stock for it collapsed due to the Dust Bowl. They were reduced to essentially soaking strips of onion in beef grease and making a sandwich out of that.
yeah, there again, this entire thing is absolutely fucked once you start digging into it. Of just like
Things were so
how
bad that the notoriously stingy government on largesse. This is why school lunches became a thing.
yes, because it was that
Originally, it
or
was
let
seen as
people
like a poverty
starve.
thing, like, here, kid, have an apple and some pea soup, the bare minimum to survive, like little lentil. But this one was, they saw all these poor kids starving to death, and they were like, we have to actually set up a proper school lunch. This is why the 30s actually set up programs.
Yeah.
It wasn't fully rationalized under FDR, but a lot of school districts in local states did that.
Yeah. Now on top of it, there's the religious aspect of this because oh boy, oh boy. Welcome to the work culture fuckery of America where it's like you obviously if you're not working 100% if something has gone wrong and you're having to move because of things outside your control, it is obviously still your fault and you should be punished
The
for it.
shade of the puritanical aspect of society, yeah.
Yeah. So, they went to basically then of course there's the people that claim that this is punishment from God for being sinners. Obviously the migrants are the most sinful because they're the ones being punished. Fuck them.
Ignore, and this is also a nod to immigration waves at this point, because this is during a period actually where immigration was massively throttled due to the Republican administrations, which went pretty hard nativist during that time.
Yes.
Less than a decade prior, that's when it was called the Chinese Exclusion Act, but it also essentially throttled all immigration from Asia. Unironically, this is part of was one of the many reasons Japan eventually went to war with the U.S. Because
Yeah.
they always saw themselves as equal to the Europeans, so they were always very pissed they were lumped in with the Chinese or like the native Indians of South Asia. They were kind of pissed.
They were incredibly pissed.
But yeah, migrants often, because again, when you're in that situation, quite a few of them had to turn to petty crime. Some of them actually would join essentially smuggling outfits, particularly since this is the era of prohibition. They may not
Oh
have been
yeah.
mobsters, but they definitely tried to make money off the side. Some of them, because they did vaudeville, vaudeville usually has some raunchy, like, back alley stuff. You got some prostitution rings going, all this sorts of gambling. Gambling was a big thing.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you got to have something to smile about. There's not much out there for you, so you might as well try to smile about it. Yeah, people can be terrible. That's one of the many, many things. And actually, this is where the term hobo came from. And actually, this reminds me, there's a big difference between, I believe it's I think it's called
Drifter, hobo, bum, basically. Like a
there's
drifter is
drifter.
someone who just never settles down. A hobo is someone moving around looking for work, and then a bum just is someone who just doesn't work.
There's the drifter who will work, who can work. They often choose not to. They just move about. They usually work so they have money to move about. The hobo always seeks money and can actually be gainfully employed as long as there's work to be had. The bum is a layabout and will only work when forced to, and will, in the first opportunity, try to escape it. Yeah, this in the real world, not the Darkness one. It's sad. Yeah, Chronicles of Darkness doesn't really go as hard into the whole World of Darkness being a darker lens of the world. It doesn't
It's more
quite go
like
that.
things can be more fucked up than normal, but like not, how would I put it? It's not the gothic punk attitude of old White
Like in
Wolf.
old World of Darkness, you would have gloriously ham-fisted scenes like evil Pentex subsidiary essentially turning them into seeking farmers and turning them into Fordlandia slave complexes.
Yeah, and then on top of that, like gothic skyscrapers and
Even
shit.
ignoring all the Art Deco that would have been instead.
Yeah, like welcome to Old World of Darkness, where everything got built into gothic style skyscrapers because that's the aesthetic
Gothic
that they
style
wanted.
skyscrapers, and in the old World of Darkness, the Great Dust Bowl was clearly the
Clearly a
mages.
failed technocracy experiment.
No, it's actually the traditions accidentally blowing up a beta tested fertilizer machine that irradiated the land, or a Pentex experiment.
Yeah.
Like that's old world. This is more just shit went bad. Oh, they also mentioned there's a variety of threats. They mentioned railroad employees because hobos they went on trains because A, train fare was pretty cheap, especially if you went in the economy, and B, you can sneak on the train.
You could just ride them, especially stock
Like
cars at the
they're
time.
not gonna stop them if they're not gonna stop as long as you don't cause no trouble usually. But
Yep,
that's what the
and
employees usually try to kick them off.
yeah. In any case,
In fact, actually, this is actually a nod. The Prometheans have their own sort of pictoglyph language. They're
they
kind
picked
of
it up
they picked it
probably
up
from the
from the
hobos,
hobos. Yeah,
and it just sort of spread globally because, well, Prometheans travel. They travel a lot.
there's also the hobo code.
Yeah, which is that, basically is that you help each other out. You help whenever you can. Treat them well. Try to stay clean. Don't refuse charity, but don't beg for it too much.
Don't beg.
Uh,
Take charity when asked. Don't try to beg too much. Find work as if and you can. If and you can't, try to help around to make people go, oh yeah, you might be a hobo that don't got no house, but at least you're not pooping in the streets.
yeah. Also, try to encourage runaway kids to go home. Basically,
Yeah,
that was the other big
ethical.
one.
Sadly, the ethical hobo died a horrible death.
Mostly because it's like, well, this is the kind of disaster that would end in ethical hobo, and for the most part.
It would do that, but also, hey, let's take our insane asylums and let all the people out and do nothing about that.
Thank you, Reagan. Very cool.
Very cool. So,
Basically, every problem in modern America can be boiled down
oh,
to
I'm glad they
Reagan did a
mentioned P.T.
thing.
Barnum Circus. I'm glad they mentioned
They
it.
did, yes.
Good
They mentioned a
choice.
lot of stuff.
Good
So
choice.
there's a lot of like
Remember,
weird
things are
stuff happening.
shit. Things are shit, so people try to find things to entertain. And what better way than to find people with horrendous deformities and stare at them like they're animals in a zoo?
Yes. So this is actually where we get into some of the more fun bits of the Sideshow Carney, because one of the most popular ways to make money for among these drifters or whatever else, because people would spend money on this sort of things because it's like it's a distraction from the absolute insanity of
Like, you can bring the kids, you can marvel at the guy who's able to shove nails into his face.
of course.
human blockhead routine. Like something simple, you could do that. Dude eats sword, lady has massive beard, shit like that, because it allows you to ignore the fact that your job lost like 80% of its workers, and the only reason you managed to survive was you were new and thus lower paid. And
Yeah,
even then,
there's
your business is probably getting shuttered in the next 6 months because you're seeing like some managers contemplate jumping out that window.
yeah.
And that's at the best. Like, this is, let's find entertainment any way we can. Let's laugh at the deformed people.
Welcome to this. Now, a lot of these sideshow performers were actually able to live out quite well because they were the talent and they were the attraction, and
On top of
therefore,
that, this type of show culture has been popular since the mid 19th century,
yeah.
but it experiences a second renaissance during this time. And they mentioned
So
kind of why that the people with these sorts of deformities were a bit more common. This is before the EPA. This is also before. To give you an idea, this is less than 20 years prior. The Jungle was written by Upton Sinclair to basically try to show the horrendous working conditions of the masses and how you should sympathize and try to uplift them, make their lives better, and work in solidarity. But people interpreted it as, holy shit, there's rats and dead people in my hot dogs. So,
yeah,
things like
the
standards
FDA,
for food and chemicals,
the
not
FDA
high.
is actually, remember this. The FDA is something that was created by Roosevelt. Mostly because a lot of the drugs, as mentioned at this time, were incredibly dangerous for you to take.
Only less than 20 years prior, to give you an idea, less than 20 years prior, it's only been less than 20 years that cocaine was banned as a usable substance. I think it was still used as a very strict over the counter in some cases at this point.
Yeah, there
Heroin
was
still was, but this is when they were trying to find better. This is because they thought it was better than morphine.
morphine is actually stronger than heroin.
It's just they
Um,
originally thought heroin didn't have the addictive side effects of morphine.
the,
Little did they know.
incorrect. It's the reverse.
Little did they know.
Heroin is actually more addictive than morphine. Um,
I could be swapping it. I know one of them was still in limited. Oh, I remember. It is actually heroin was still used as a component to some antidepressants or something.
yeah, like I mean, I'd be pretty much the opposite of depressed if I was on heroin. I'd be fucking catatonic.
It would
So
be it's one of the two. I forget which one was used in up until the 1950s. Some variation of either an opiate or cocaine was used to try to elevate the mood. I'm pretty sure it was opiates. I think it was heroin initially.
yeah, there's a lot of like stage
It was
magic and
also
trickery
used as
going
an
on too.
antipsychotic, to give you an idea.
I can believe that one. I can believe that sitting someone with psychotic tendencies down and shoving them full of heroin would probably be pretty good at keeping him quiet. Like I'd be pretty fucking quiet after that. I'd be like, oh god,
Yeah, they
you'd
did
be
experiment with it. It wasn't purely opiates. It was supposed to be blended with other chemicals that were supposed to rebalance brain chemistry because they were starting to figure it out. But the opiates were designed to essentially de-escalate and tone down the psychosis because you're
it,
high.
it was kind of 50-50. I mean, it would work sometimes.
Remember, this is the era of time where leucotomies were allowed.
Yeah.
If you're wondering what a leucotomy is, it has a much more famous name, the lobotomy.
Yep. And in any way, besides the wonderful world of early 20th century medicine, which is basically like it is only slightly less of a horror show than late 18th century,
To
19th
give you an
century
idea, they
medicine.
only just recently discovered about 50 years ago you're supposed to wash your fucking hands.
Also, let's not forget that
This is less than 20 years before they locked a man into the insane asylum because he said, "Wash your fucking hands when you're handling a woman giving birth, you fucking degenerates."
oh, it gets even more. It's also the other reason why there's a lot more birth defects is that abortion is not very common and sonograms don't exist. You see, one of the most common reasons to have an abortion is that your child is incredibly deformed. because that happens. It's a lot less common now because we've got all the uh, environmental regulations that keep all this stuff. But it occasionally will happen, and it's one of the leading causes is that the child is going to be born horribly disfigured and disabled.
And the others are diseases. Fun fact: if you get rickets, if your legs are bent in the right way, you can sell yourself as a crab person.
Yes, you can.
Same with tuberculosis, because you'll look like some weird hunched over, like the man with no heart. Look, how does he survive? And the answer is not for fucking long, pal. And last but
Yeah,
not least, World War One veterans. Hey, they came back. The bonus army came back. So, fun fact: World War One resulted in a renaissance in medical technology. It's actually where the blood transfusion came from.
it's where blood transfusion came from and modern plastic surgery.
Yep.
Because it turns
And
out that a lot
and
of the people
modern
that
prosthetics.
yes, a lot of people came back with absolutely horrific injuries and they wanted to live relatively normal lives. So the idea of like for example rebuilding someone's nose kind of regained popularity here. There was also like the trying to stretch the flesh from like the forehead over like a missing eye with burns or like to try to replace a cheek. There was some other like really crazy stuff being done with
And
like
some of them turned into, well, things that will cause you nightmares to look at, because
there,
there are some pretty painful looking wounds.
there's some where it's like, oh yeah, your cheeks are completely gone. We can't really fix that.
And their
Uh,
response is to become known as the Skeleton Man.
yeah. Where they literally like they'd have to,
To
it,
give you an
it,
idea, this is the era where 40 years prior, 40 years prior, a man had a railroad spike go through his head, and he actually walked around with the replica on the sideshow going, hey, this is what came out of my head.
yeah,
You
like
could
there's
even
so
see the bit of brain matter from it, too. We kept it on there.
yeah, there's some of the freaks though are just like people that are legitimately like, I am a giant. They're
I,
six
I'm
feet
like
tall and
I'm like 6'7". So yeah, I'm a
yeah,
giant, and look, I can lift up this 500-pound weight casually.
it's not 500 pounds. He's
It's
not
actually
actually six
more
foot
like
seven.
300, but it looks big.
It doesn't even it's not even 300. It's like
It's like
100,
it's like 100,
if
and it just
that.
looks really big.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's people that were hermaphrodites. There were like weird half men, half woman, and it's just someone
It's
that
just
with a
like
really good tailor.
either had a really
Uh,
good tailor or just was a dude with bitch tits,
yeah, there's a lot of
or a lady who just has an unfortunate mustache.
yeah, there's a lot of this other stuff is just sort of contortionists were very popular. You
If
had
you were
sort of
born as a little one, yeah, you made bank on this stuff, because they always loved looking at the little folks doing little games.
yeah, dwarves were always popular and have always been popular as entertainment.
Especially if you paired them up with a giant, especially if you got a guy with acromegaly. That
Yeah.
shit writes for itself.
Yeah, the sword swallowers, fire eaters, people that pretended to do this, heavily pierced and
People who will literally mutilate themselves for money. That's a thing
yeah,
that happened too.
yeah. There's also people that would just get really extravagant tattoos, and
People who
for some of
used con man tricks.
yep, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of everything. In any case, again, as they talk about this, they actually give into okay, how did it happen here? The problem is basically that there's no fucking grass anymore, right? So when the grasses are gone and they're left fallow, the topsoil becomes looser and looser and looser
Because here's the
because there's
thing:
nothing growing to keep it together.
the Midwest on first glance, when you look, if you're going through them rolling glacial hills, you're thinking this place looks real nice.
It looks a lot
It's
like Europe,
green.
right?
The thing is, though, climatically, it's closer to the steppes of the Cossack or the savanna of Africa.
Yeah, it's not
It's
anywhere
it's
near.
green. There's aquifers. There's nice water traces, but it doesn't rain a whole lot, so it tends towards dryness. It's actually closer to the Mediterranean climate, but less hot and less rainy, actually. So you get one impression, but you're dealing with a completely different climate. Combine that with farming practices which destroyed the topsoil, and well, there you go.
Yeah. So, as somebody said, what about the technology right now? Well, for that matter, rural areas don't have electricity at this point. Nowadays, electricity in rural America
One
is
of
basically a given.
Actually, I'll give an example to give you an idea. One of the this is actually one of the greatest things that Roosevelt did during his second term. The Tennessee Valley Authority, which was a mass electrification project that was designed to guarantee that the Upper South actually had access to the same potential for lights that a good chunk of the Rust Belt, or which it was known as the Steel Belt at the time, had. Like one of his
Yeah,
big policies was he built a variety of hydroelectric dams, coal-fired power plants, and brought electricity to the masses. It was called Tennessee because it first started in the Shenandoah Valley, particularly around Tennessee.
the River Valley Authority. There's also the Rural Electrification Commission,
That's another thing.
which,
He also tried. I don't think it went through. Tried to do a tractor purchase complex thing where
yeah, because mechanizing agriculture. Because here's the thing: U.S. agriculture was starting to fully mechanize at this point in the 30s. Then the Dust Bowl happens, and money
and
is
that's
no
when the
longer
farmer
there.
subsidies came in, because one of the things
Yeah,
were you got a line of credit to buy your own tractor, because up until then you usually used livestock,
you use horse-drawn plows or steam-powered ones.
because there
Where
were steam powered tractors at the time.
Yeah, they were more common actually than a lot of the internal combustion
And
engine
to
for
give
a
you an
while,
idea, the Grapes of Wrath was actually banned in the Soviet Union.
because it depicted having tractors for everyone, which was a thing in the United States because we produced so goddamn many of them
I
because
mean,
of.
yes, they were older steam driven powered ones, but that combined with the fact that those farmers actually had, it was like most of them had a wristwatch too.
Yeah, most of them had the money for that and the manufacturing capability for that.
And the Soviets
Meanwhile,
banned it because that's what they were trying to get. That's what their propaganda, that we're going to guarantee that you get this.
yeah, and it wasn't working out mostly because as it turns out, it's not very easy to build an
What
industrial
worked in
base overnight.
Russia doesn't work in Kazakhstan or the Ukraine.
Also, it doesn't help that on top of all of that, there's an incredibly paranoid man in the.
There's the paranoid man, and then there's you're using ethnic tension to gain power by basically fucking over the other Soviets, because you're trying to reaffirm yourself to the Russian ones. There's a reason
Yeah,
why no one but the Russians fucking miss the Soviets.
yeah. Then we get the really really fun stuff about this era when we're talking about the perils of the age.
Wait,
So
something I
what
found
happens
watching
if
a
you're in a
video
dust
of
bowl?
very fucked up when I read the comments said how great he was and deserves respect. Stalin?
Stalin, okay, here's one of the things. Stalin is definitely responsible for Russia becoming an industrial power in terms of like the amount of like
One of his lesser known things that
investment.
he did, one of the very lesser known things that he did was it was called the transformation of nature, where he essentially did massive electrification programs in parts of Russia that never had a fucking shot until then to have electricity.
Yeah.
Because they did try, like the Tsars and then later on the Soviets tried to actually industrialize. Stalin basically used body counts and quotas to fucking pull it off.
Yeah, like the mass industrialization of the Soviet Union came at an insane cost. In not just in terms of human lives, but also in terms of actual
He he
economic
also
efficiency.
he also is the one to actually update the Siberian Railway.
Yeah,
The Great Railway. It originally was like a relatively narrow gauge nightmare train. He actually made it so you can go both ways.
yeah, I forgot about that bit. Yeah,
Although
the
the
original
German
Trans-Siberian.
invasion delayed some of that project until actually Khrushchev's time.
Yeah, the amount of people forget just how fucked Russia was going into the First World War, and really they were about just as fucked going into the second in terms of like actual
To,
development.
to give you an idea, whenever people show off the myths of Stalingrad, like the great tank factories and shit, that's like the tiny industrial area. The rest of
Yeah,
Stalingrad were like nice looking, relatively nice looking wooden workman houses.
a lot of it was. There was also more of an there was the industrial area. There were the grain repositories, as well, which were much more hardened buildings. There were actual concrete buildings around the center of the
Also,
city.
another thing Stalin did, despite the horrible Holodomor and all those things, that was also one of the last times mass famines happened.
Yeah, the
Although he
fact
did
is that
weaponize it. Let's be fair, he
oh
did
yeah, he did
weaponize it.
weaponize it, but the reason why the mass famines didn't happen in the future is because Khrushchev bit the bullet and
Funny
actually
corn man.
bought. Yeah, Funny Corn Man decided to actually be like, we can buy foreign wheat.
Yeah, Funny corn man actually was willing to do this. This is why he's the best Soviet leader they ever had.
Funny Corn Man, unironically, is probably the best leader Russia has had for like the last 3 centuries. Yeah, that's really fucking sad when you
Alexander
think
the
about it.
Second, the reformer. You
I
forgot
don't know,
him.
yeah, you got a point there, but still, it's pretty fucking sad when it's like Funny Corn Man and Man Who No One Remembers.
I think also, what was it, Nicholas the First, who was
No,
friends with
Nikki the First
Napoleon?
was
The guy who was
Nikki the
friends with
First.
Napoleon.
That was Alexander the Second, I want to say.
No, second was
But
decades later.
was it Alexander the First? I can't remember which.
Could have been
Either
like
way,
Peter the Fourth or something really stupid. I don't know.
yeah, I don't
There's a
know.
lot of Russian czars.
There's a lot of fucking czars with the same goddamn name. It isn't at least like the king. It isn't like
Look,
France where you can just go.
Here's the best part. Funny corn man's Ukrainian, so keep that in fucking mind. It takes
one
the
of those,
Ukrainian to make Russia not shit.
yeah. The Death of Stalin is a fantastic movie for portraying Khrushchev, where it's like, yes, the man legitimately had to act like a clown to Stalin to keep himself alive. It's really he had zero fond memories of the man.
Well, to give you an idea, he literally barely escaped death because early on, Funny Corn Man actually was a Trotskyite. He actually was very good friends with Trotsky, or at least was mentored by him.
Yeah.
And some of the concept he had of maybe not the permanent revolution, but the concept of Soviet democracy, that appealed to him until Stalin almost killed him.
Yeah.
Then he had to act like a clown. He literally had to do a performative clown act.
He had to do performances and make jokes for
Stalin.
Stalin.
And be as dumb as humanly possible. He had to pretend to be the dumbest man to ever live.
It was like, you know that picture of like, I pretended to be mentally retarded for the last 15 years? You know that one anime
He had
still?
to do it.
He had to do that. He actually had to do that, and it's part of the reason why he kind of came from absolutely nowhere.
Oh yeah,
the
other people, because there was Malenkov and Beria, they were both jockeying for a position alongside Molotov. He comes out of nowhere going, yeah, the thing about me being dumb.
The army.
I pretended to be mentally challenged for the last 15 years.
15 years. and the other thing is he managed to get the army on side, which was really the key to actually taking power in Russia at that time. He then immediately sidelined Zhukov as fast as possible for very obvious reasons.
So here's another fun fact about the Dust Bowl. We could talk about Soviet because it's fun, and they also went through their own trials and problems. Funnily enough, the Great Depression also helped them because of how fucked their economy was. It wasn't connected to the world market due to mass embargoes. To give you an idea, the Soviet wasn't recognized as a state by most of the great powers until 1934.
Yeah, basically they consider them an illegitimate state.
So that's why they were able to get away with the Great Depression.
Yeah, which is again really fucking funny to me, because it's like they legitimately had tried to send an armed expedition into Russia to overthrow the Bolshevik government in the during the Russian Civil War. That completely failed. The Soviets had then been fighting over the remnants of what was the Russian Empire till about 1923, when like the actual open conflict really ends.
Mainly because even Japan couldn't hold it up anymore.
Yeah, I mean, Japan was basically like, what the fuck is happening? Everyone was like, what the fuck is actually happening in Russia? And to some degree, the Soviet propaganda in the early stages was mostly not complete bullshit. There was a decent amount of it, but there was actually a lot of actual information. Then Stalin takes over and it becomes almost complete, absolute bullshit. We are fine. Everything is fine. There are no problems in Soviet Russia. We have plenty of food. Blatant fucking lies, basically. But it's a weird period in the Soviet Union during this time, because it's like it's the transition from like what could have been in the early Soviet period to the Stalinist era.
It's so sad, yeah.
It
A lot of the
like
most interesting experiments you could see in terms of art, media, everything
art, media, culture, sciences.
for 10 years.
Yeah, like for not for 10 years, more for like about 6 or 7 is
About, yeah.
because there's a lot of like actual interesting research being done, especially in the field of aviation.
Yep, the Soviet
And
aviation clubs.
there's a
One
lot
of the
of
first
really
circumpolar navigations.
yeah, there's a lot of very interesting things being. Oh, right, Stalin. Off to Gulag for having counter-revolutionary thought, comrade. Also because we think you go to West with design.
Seriously, how do you come up with ugly picture like this? And it's like the interesting experimental architecture they were dabbling in at the time.
like then of course there's socialist realism that's developing at this time as well. There's
Like, to give you an idea, they originally were building a world congress. Like, the concept being that it was like supposed to be similar to the UN building, but for
yeah,
socialist parties around the world where they would meet together for in the event that the world
for
revolution ever
internationals,
happened.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like again, there's a lot of the early Soviet Union is a fascinating place in terms of
They
just
even
like
they even tried to get rid of Cyrillic. They actually tried to go to the
yeah,
Roman script, and they also tried to destroy the Russian kind of because it was called Russian egoism. They tried to
yeah.
do that via what was
Stalin
called
stopped that.
Koreanization.
Stalin stopped that.
Of
It's
course he
really
did.
weird because Lenin's a weird guy in that he's like, yes, Russian is obviously great, but also
Russia's
like
the
the
greatest
ethnic
of the SSRs, but there are other SSRs.
are
Uh,
SSRs and they must be preserved culturally. Lenin is weird like that, where Lenin's kind of in this weird like
Lenin was interesting in that you could debate with him, but once he makes his opinion, you're not moving him from that spot.
he's never changed. He's not changing his mind. You before he makes up his mind, he's very open to any idea you throw at him. And then once he makes it up, it's over. Like
Like, to
you
give you
better
an
get
idea,
along with program.
he did experiment with like the early Soviet Politburo concept was actually surprisingly more democratic than you'd expect.
Yeah, a lot of it is
It was
surprisingly more
still very much
democratic
a
than you'd
thing of
expect.
ego and a thing of like cliques and authoritarian, but like you actually had some direct democracy elements, which was
Yeah,
really quickly fucking culled by Stalin.
yeah. Uh, Again, we're off
Interesting shit.
topic, but it's an interesting time period if you're looking to run a game of Demon. Like,
Because that's
holy
the thing.
shit.
Stalin, basically, demons exploited Lenin's experimentalism to essentially
Yeah,
build their own infrastructure.
that's in Companion, and it's one of the better
It's really
sections of
cool.
Companion is the
It's
Russian
the Great
Revolution.
Purge demon.
It's not Great Purge. It's Russian Revolution and direct aftermath demon, where it's like
Who would
they're
have been the least
legitimately
bad option to be heir to Lenin?
uh,
It depends on who you ask.
yeah, not Trotsky, not Stalin.
I'd actually unironically go with Zinoviev if I had to pick.
Zinoviev is probably one of the better ones. There's like we had a weird alt history concept where it was like
Sverdlov would have been good, but he died.
yeah, Sverdlov. There was another guy that was doing like the labor relations shit that was interesting. He ended up, I think, getting purged, but Stalin basically went like, "Oh wait, no, he was actually innocent." Like
Bukharin could
five
it be
years later,
also an interesting one?
Bukharin would be interesting as well to see what his Soviet Union would have looked like because Bukharin
I would say
had
Zinoviev or Bukharin's would be the most interesting and possibly least dangerous.
possibly least dangerous. You never know. Like
Because here's a fun fact. I looked into Haitian history. You want to know the
yeah,
scariest shit? The horrible dictator Papadoc. If you looked at his record before he became president,
you wouldn't have thought that. Oh yeah, this can't
he
go wrong at all.
emphasizes live long enough, you become the villain.
Well,
He was part of teams that essentially wiped out tropical diseases on his island.
yeah,
Like you
mind you,
would not have
much
expected
like
him to become that.
Dr. Ben Carson, the effectiveness of someone as a medical doctor has no bearing on their actual sanity.
Exactly. Also, Haiti seems to have this weird. The moment you become president is the moment you get corrupted,
You either get corrupted or you get assassinated, like the most recent guy.
or overthrown by the military. Thank you, Stenio Vincent.
Yep.
The fun thing is their military actually was apolitical and well trained. Vincent literally did a piss baby war with Trujillo of the Dominican Republic that destroyed any professionalism and non-corruption in that military that was trained by the United States Marine Corps.
Yeah, because the United States had put him in power in a rigged election, right?
Um, not no. Actually, he was one. They actually tried to kick him out when he tried to do his rigged election to win a third term.
Yeah, because I remember there was one election in Haiti that the United States literally went in and held the
1924, because
election.
1924. That's when they intervened because the opponent that was set to win effectively was the was I don't know how to describe it, but basically Haiti completely broke down societally too. That was the other aspect.
Yeah,
Like it was partially to prop up a government friendly, but it was also like the country was going into anarchy.
yeah,
Anywho, the Dust Bowl. So the Dust Bowl didn't just affect the U.S. It also badly affected Canada. Canadian farmers actually, I think this is actually where social credit came from, is how the government handled the Dust Bowl, because mainly it was I think Manitoba and Alberta as well as parts of British Columbia that really got wrecked by this. Western Canada got
everyone
fucked
forgets
by the
about
Dust Bowl.
Saskatchewan.
Saskatchewan as well. West Canada got fucked, and this is where social credit really got its origins from. A lot of the farmer parties actually gained a boost, and this is where their obsession with the Canadian farmer came from. Is just how goddamn bad it was. To give you an idea, it's to the point the
Yeah,
Canadians had to build entire. They spent like a lot of time building like housing initiatives because of
yeah,
the flood.
it was terrible in Canada. It was bad in Mexico, but wasn't as bad as it
It
was
was
anywhere
dog
else.
shit in Mexico. No, it was bad. It was horrible in Mexico. The difference was they were already so bad off. Uh,
Yeah,
to give you an idea, it wasn't until Lazaro Cardenas that they even remotely had an improvement in society, because
base Cardenas,
Cardenas
basically.
legitimately tried to make a functioning democracy in Mexico.
He kind of succeeded too, which is the most impressive fucking thing.
He also there's a reason one of his many titles includes like the protector of the campesinos, which are the poorest of the farmers of Mexico, because he genuinely tried to make their lives better.
Yeah, Cardenas was later, I think. Well, he
He
basic.
later did the same shit that Calles did, unfortunately, which is what started the kind of perfect dictatorship of Mexico.
Yeah,
It is one of the biggest faults I have for the man, is
yeah,
he was just as nosy.
yeah. Pretty good otherwise, though, when you can consider that
Yeah,
Mexico.
elevated the rights of the poorest farmers. Tried to actually reach out and try to negotiate with native Indios, which were kicked out, which were basically marginalized by prior dictatorships.
Tried to create an actual social functioning
Developed,
safety net.
created an well, he didn't create the bank, but he revitalized the Mexican banking sector. He also built the CBT, which is
The
this
cotton
massive
ball
union.
torture.
No, it was this massive trade union that was supposed to
I
protect their rights.
know,
They
but
became a corrupt shithole by the 50s, but at the time it actually gave a lot of protections.
yeah,
Like he did a lot of shit.
yeah. So they talk about like the perils of the age, where it's like dust storms caused pneumonia,
Oh, one more thing
which is the
Cardenas did.
other issue.
Same thing as FDR. He also created a subsidy program.
Hmm.
Unironically, NAFTA fucked it.
Yep.
NAFTA absolutely fucked it and sent like millions to homelessness.
NAFTA legitimately only benefited the United States.
Oh no,
It's
it
one.
fucked over everyone. It's just the U.S. got the most benefits out of getting fucked in the process too. Everyone suffered a bit from it.
In any case, here they're talking about with all the science and technology, where it's like the only thing that works as antibacterials is sulfa. You can actually be allergic to these, by the way. It's not
Okay, so yeah,
uncommon.
uh, science and technology, electric. I like that they go into this. There's not a lot of electrification. You're gonna
There
see it in
really
major.
isn't.
You're gonna see it in the Steel Belt. You're gonna see it in the Great Northeastern Enclave. You'll see it in large cities like Detroit, Chicago, along parts of the West Coast. You're not gonna see it a lot in the South, except in the largest of cities, and you're sure as shit not gonna see it in the Midwest.
The
Radios are
thing that
fairly common, but
Hmm.
Depending on where you are, you might have to go to a neighbor to listen in.
And let's also not forget that this is before the Rural Electrification Committee and all that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
stuff. So
Also, television. No.
there's a few,
There's
not
experimentations, but yeah, no, it's all
yeah.
radio.
It's almost all radio. Americans in the 1930s also have the issue of the wonderful world of polio. There's a
Polio.
lot of limbs and deformities and all this other sort of shit that is today. It's like you don't see this today, but it used to be. There's a lot more deformed little kids running around the United States because of polio and other childhood diseases.
Caused by malnutrition, like rickets.
Hmm. Nowadays, these sort of things are much rarer, thankfully, but it's
Electroshock
still,
therapy. Oh yeah, psychology in this time period is even more rudimentary.
yeah, it is.
We mentioned it. Leucotomies were used, literal lobotomies.
Yeah,
Another thing
some
they
of the
used
stuff
is
that we're
electroshock therapy because the idea is you could restart the brain to not be depressed. Have you tried turning your brain on and off again?
the funniest thing is that legitimately does work. It's just painful as fuck, and also not exactly what I'd call reliable. Electroshock therapy can, in fact, do helpful things to the human body. It's just that it's like you need to know what you're doing, and it's not a one size fits all solution.
Hades unironically cursed. Yep, Jim, it's pretty bad. Also, here's another fun fact about America during this time period. Yeah, you can just walk up and buy you can buy an actual machine gun.
No, actually, the NFA,
National,
I think,
no. National Firearms Act was 34. You could do it up until 34,
I was going to say it was like 34. Before then, yes, you could mail order a machine gun. The thing is that these were also incredibly expensive.
but you could do it.
Uh, you could do it. Like there's people that bitch about like the machine gun registry and all that. You've got to understand that the NFA was originally much more restrictive. And a lot of it was a response to the absolute boom in crime during this time.
Because when you had enough money, yeah, you can buy submachine guns, and they were very popular among mobsters.
They were very popular among mobsters, and police departments were basically outgunned. Even federal law enforcement, the little that existed, was not exactly extremely well armed, and they had to buy private. It was not exactly a great time to be a cop in America for if you were dealing with a lot of these Depression era gangsters, because they
There's
were
a
often
reason why
much heavily,
Batman became very popular as a comic book during this time.
yeah, they were often much more heavily armed than the police. They were often much more experienced than the police in certain cases, because turns out a lot of them had service overseas.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a few other kind of like issues that pop up with that, where it's like how do you even deal with like state lines, and like the FBI becomes much more powerful in this era because one of the things that uh, a lot of these gangsters were using to get away with what they were doing was that they would operate close to state lines, where by crossing state lines it was now illegal for the cops in the jurisdiction that they're being chased from, to actually cross the border.
This is unironically why the FBI as well as the federal police were created.
Yeah, like this is why the U.S. Marshals were expanded, and why the FBI became what we know today. Because the issue of state and county lines was a major problem for law enforcement, who were very territorial in this era, and still are. Um, and it's also just like you got some really wild crimes in this era, like really wild. Uh, you have to understand that prostitution, despite being illegal, was extremely prevalent in in America at this time.
Yeah, it was just they looked the other way.
Yeah, it's legitimately that they just looked the other way because it was considered a victimless crime. Uh, Also because it's like, let's be fair, it can't really be.
But don't forget the absolute madmen among the Catholic clergy who legitimately ran a wine smuggling, like massive amounts of wine
Yes,
smuggling.
yes, they did. There was some absolutely nuts shit. Basically though, like the in
Also, a little known fact: the border between Canada and the U.S. became an interesting crime zone scene because it was very popular to go up there to get liquor to sell down south for a higher price.
Yes, the amount of smuggling over the Canadian border was extreme. It wasn't actually as bad at the Mexican border, mostly because nobody there gave a shit. Um, down in certain areas of the South, they just ignored
Well, to give you an
the
idea, as an example, I'm a bit familiar. Texas legitimately was still part really much of the Wild West type at this point. To give you an idea,
yeah
in 1933, a recently founded oil town. Their sheriff legitimately was murdered by an actual fucking bandit.
yeah
Like you had full on murder wars between like self-appointed town sheriffs and their local police. And essentially the same bandits and robbers you'd see like from the fucking 50 years ago, like from your former ex-Confederate officers who fled west.
yep.
Like that shit was still alive during that time. Also, you
And
had also the equivalent of Mexican cartels did a lot of money selling tequila and other things up north.
yeah
The version of Mexican gangbangers then, they actually were known for wearing their like pinstripe zoot suits and fucking elaborate hats.
yeah, like basically
Like
it's
they
like the
looked like
guys.
proto pimps. It's pretty neat.
It's yeah, the zoot suit stuff was pretty fucking baller, honestly. Like those guys looked awesome.
But the long struggle, they go into detail. Basically, I'm just going to really quickly summarize. This entire segment is, yeah, America was much more segregated, much more oppressive towards people that basically didn't have as many rights.
Yeah,
I'm just going to be real fucking quick on that because, like,
yeah. Oh, also the other thing to note is that guns were now much more common in America and became the primary murder weapon and would never lose that spot
oh yeah, that's actually another reason why the firearms law was passed.
because suddenly gun violence exploded in the 20s.
Funnily enough, if you're wondering why it's legal to buy flamethrowers in, I believe it's 48 of the 50 states,
Yep.
when the Firearms Act was written initially, they didn't think of flamethrowers.
Nobody did because but it's also because flamethrowers have legitimate agricultural uses.
It's just they're only. It's also on top of that, you needed to basically buy it from the army.
Yeah, like there weren't like manufacturers of flamethrowers at the time.
It
There's
was only
legitimate
it was only
agricultural
in
uses, but
2015 where this giga-brained idiot in Senate was like, "I vote we should get rid of flamethrowers," accidentally
it
pointing out.
didn't work.
No, accidentally pointing out, oh wait, we can legally buy this shit, and companies are like, yes, here, you can buy this flamethrower.
And they're
Very
popular.
cool, Senator. Very
one of
cool.
my one of my favorite things with that is that there's a guy in I think it was Montana that ended up getting into a major dispute with his city over using a flamethrower to clear his driveway of snow, which is incredibly baller. Like, holy shit! I wish I had a
It's tool
flamethrower for that.
use. It's one part tool use, but also that's the thing. The police can't do shit. It's not illegal as long as you follow basic safety protocols to use them.
Yeah,
They'll try to get you on everything else, but like no, literally, flamethrower.
the
There's
flamethrower is
only
not illegal.
I think it's illegal in Maryland. I
I think
think
it's illegal in Nevada. It's either in Nevada or California, and I think that's
California.
basically because of the fire. They basically went, "This is a
Actually,
massive
it's
fire risk."
legal in California, but it's restricted to wildlife services because it's supposed to be used for
Ah,
controlled burns.
that would
They
make
don't use it
sense.
often though because of environmental concerns,
That would make
which is a
sense,
little
honestly.
stupid since a lot of the climate there you have to do very controlled burns,
But the problem is that the California actually doesn't own a lot of their forest.
which is
Um,
many problems. There's a lot of problems. Basically, California is what
they can't
happens when
do
you
control.
flood the state with a lot of dudes at once.
Yeah, and a lot of those people buy up land out in the woods, which then results in that the people that own the most land in
It
California
also doesn't
forests are
help
private
that
individuals and the federal government. Well, the federal government can't actually do these burns themselves, and
And it doesn't help that there's inter-service squabbles because again, EPA sometimes has to step in, and sometimes it is due to really stupid reasons. Because I know one of the, like we mentioned, the spotted owl gets mentioned a lot because there is a species of animal that was used up until the 90s because it was thought to be endangered when it turned out it actually wasn't.
Yeah, mind you,
It
that's
was
one of the
just
fun
due to
things about
error because it
wildlife.
was like a very shy type of bird, if I remember right.
Yeah, it can be very hard to know what's endangered or not because there's certain animals that are just,
Like there's some
really,
animals that show up all the time, but you find out there's only like 5,000 of them left in this area. And then there's like, you think they're extinct, but
yeah,
no, there's like a fuckload of them, and they're like native to much further than you think.
yeah,
But anywho, it's prohibited slash I think illegal in California. It's illegal in Maryland mainly because of how close it is to DC, and there is a law requiring certification I think in Ohio.
yeah. And again,
Basically, it's like the
it's a
equivalent of
flamethrower.
using explosives.
It's like I can understand why people are a little sketchy about letting you just get the flamethrower out. Like, it's a lot of collateral damage you can cause completely by mistake.
But yeah, straight up,
Fire,
they mentioned in the American section, women in this time period were seen as the as the care providers. It is seen as it's seen as a moral failing if they're out at work because they've clearly like it is clearly a failing on the husband's part. Or like they were a cad, or it's her fault because she drove him away, depending on the type of person you're asking. Not nice. And the less said about what happened to black people during this time, the better. This is literally less than 10 years after the KKK's peak in popularity, to the point where one of their number was elected, I believe, as
a
a
governor.
governor.
Yeah, governor of Indiana, I think.
Yeah.
I want to say Indiana.
Either that or he was the
I'd have to look it
kingmaker,
up.
and a lot of the state senators were fucking members. It ain't
Yeah,
pretty.
yeah.
And that
The weird
variant of
thing
the
about this, by the
KKK,
way,
people forget about this variant. It wasn't just blacks. They also did hate crimes against Catholics a lot too, which meant they also were
yeah,
very much against
Catholics and
Mexicans.
foreigners.
Yeah, because Mexicans at this point were starting to go across the border for the essentially hobo work, since this is like during after the in the aftermath of the Mexican Revolution. So hey, working the fields for like 6 months of the year, that's really reliable, and I don't have to worry about getting shot by government agents because Mexico went recently through essentially a secret war against their church, the
Yeah,
Cristero War.
because well, the church was advocating another armed revolution against the government.
Well, also on top of that, Plutarco Calles. Oh no, there was a reconciliation committee at that point.
Yeah,
There were
there was.
hardliners, but Calles basically used the hardliners to prosecute them all and began doing a series of sanctioned secret murders. And also it didn't help that there was a bunch of armed revolts by the radicals. It culminates in the most cursed timeline ever because the goddamn Klan actually sends support to the Mexican government.
Yep.
I'm not fucking with you.
Yep.
The Pope Pius had to intervene in this dumpster fire.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking wild.
So rather than get shot in that, why not just help raise cattle or something for until slaughter month, get your paycheck, and then go back to Monterrey with the American dollar. And that relationship has endured for literally 100 years. And that type of kind of, it's not really transient. It's kind of the hobo, but it's more of the drifter kind of thing.
It's migrant labor basically,
It's
where they
migratory
migrate
labor, yeah.
back and forth. The in any case, when we
I
get to
just
the
had to
Great
point that
Depression,
out because they have an entire segment on it, so I felt we should have
yeah,
explained a bit.
most basically put, the Great Depression hits rural areas hard, but not as hard as urban areas for relatively obvious reasons, which is that the farmers were essentially suddenly had the ability to really get rid of their debt in a weird way, because since nobody had any money, nobody could actually buy up property that was repossessed by banks. So oftentimes the banks would try to sell this at auction, and
No one would
farmers could
step
just
up
acquire it. Yeah, local communities would just not buy it for would
because either
buy
they
it and then
couldn't or the
immediately sell
farmers.
it for nothing to like
Yeah.
their neighbors.
So okay, to give you an idea, from the point of view of the city, the Great Depression resulted in a massive loss of jobs at once.
Yeah,
Companies mass fired, mass collapsed. To give you an idea, there's a reason one of the common like beliefs is you would see actual people on Wall Street legitimately ending themselves. because that it's just everything fell apart instantly, effectively. And it didn't help when in panic they knee-jerked used protectionism, which further fucked everything. Because you need to trade to actually get the resources to build the things that you actually want to sell. And if you're trying to sell outside of your country, well, good luck. You just shot yourself in the foot, you idiot. Smoot Hawley, you goddamn idiots. Although, let's be fair, the United Kingdom and other great nations did the same stupid thing. Let's be
Yeah,
fair.
basically everybody did something really fucking stupid at this point. It was a global
So
problem.
that's bad. But for the farms, what they saw was their incomes collapse because the value of their crops have collapsed.
And
It's
then
awful,
the
but the blessing is they still have enough buying power, and there's no one buying their land. They can cling on to it
yeah,
because no one
and
has the money, and the very few that do, they're too busy trying to figure out how to save themselves.
the main issue then becomes the Dust Bowl itself, because the Dust Bowl itself makes it like absolutely fucked for a lot of these farmers to actually even continue making their money.
By the way,
Uh,
at its worst in the Great Depression in urban areas, 1 out of 5 people did not have a job.
and those that did have a job often were working for incredibly low pay.
Mm-hmm.
The jobs that you could get, the ones that really survived, were service, sales, and government work, because someone has to keep the lights on, basically.
And that is why Franklin Roosevelt did the Conservation Corps. It was a way
Yeah,
to give very cheap, like it was horribly cheap work, but
it
it was,
gave people actual work,
and
which
on
is the
top of
real
that,
thing that
it
needed to
gave
be
them.
happen.
I think he also gave them the ability to eat at least one meal a day because of the mandated
They'd be
lunch,
given they like part of it was that like they weren't getting as paid as much as you'd think, but they were also getting a free meal out of it
a
essentially,
guaranteed lunch,
which
which that was
was not
critical.
always a thing. Yeah. It also provided for a lot of younger Americans their first chance to actually get work.
And gain skills because it's not just working on road constructions. The Conservation Corps also did things like uphold the national parks that were set up by Theodore Roosevelt and other later
Yeah, they
Parker
went out.
positions.
They would went out and actually did like a lot of the Works Progress Administration was their big one where they did a lot of
They
like
worked on housing. They also learned some of the basic tools of electricianing, being an electrician,
they
plumbing,
paved the streets of a lot of rural towns actually
work
with
crew.
using the WPA. There's a lot of that, and again, the main issue for the Great Depression was people that they didn't have any education, no
And there was a
it,
limited amount of education because some of them were tapped to essentially manage these crews, so they had to learn how to essentially schedule projects. So
yeah.
you
There's
actually
a lot
gained
of
management out of that too. Like, yeah, it's
yeah
basically the equivalent of gaining a vocational education, but that's useful. That's massive because this
yeah.
is the first kind of mass again, essentially skill gain,
hmm
and
Then
it
you
just
kind
grew
of
from
had
there.
a yeah, maintenance didn't stop. Like just tax revenue had a bit of problems and all this, but once the Dust Bowl comes to an end, really the big thing is that the FDR's New Deal and the sort of the Second World
And we
War are really
mentioned it
the
in his
kickstarts.
first term. He
Uh,
so many things.
yeah, there were problems once the economy started restarting again because a lot of the safety nets that were in place later weren't there, so you had similar crashes right away.
Well,
Uh,
the 1937 crash, which was actually caused by two factors. The first was I believe it was actually a housing crisis that was accidentally
yes,
caused. So
yeah,
okay. So in 33, he did the Conservation Corps, and one of the very early things he did in 34 was Housing Standards Act, which actually mandated minimum requirements for a domicile to actually be considered habitable, which was
this is a
supposed
very
to be a
important, and
quality
you
of
have
life thing.
landlords bitching about it to this very day.
Yeah, the shittiest scum lord, because there are actual slum lords still. They just to this day,
Yeah,
to this day.
Adam Smith was right. Kill all the landlords.
But straight up, because of this, there was a massive amount of speculation among housing. There were some safety nets for stock market speculation, but blue skies laws were not a thing until actually his second term for this reason. because it culminated in first a loss in trust in the government because of Roosevelt's attempt to pack the Supreme Court because they were the most ornery of the three branches he
They
had to fight
the
on.
oh god, the Supreme Court of this era was basically like our current court is not exactly great. This was worse.
To
This was
give you an
about five
idea,
times worse.
if you're very much of the Trump did the worst thing in the world, the Supreme Court that Roosevelt had to deal with, I would argue, is the second worst that we've ever had. The second worst we've ever had in the country. Winner goes to the
It's
one
either
Lincoln
it's the
had to deal with.
yeah, like this is either the second, this is either the first or the second
No, it's
worst.
second,
Like
easily second.
it really depends.
Lincoln had to arrest them, motherfucker.
Oh
And
right, I forgot
and
about
one
that
of
bit.
them, and several of them were on the Dred Scott case. They were still alive from that. So
Oh
no,
right, I forgot
Lincoln's
about
one
that
was
bit.
worse.
I forgot about the arresting.
He
bit
had
on
to
that.
suspend habeas corpus and basically house arrest them.
Yeah. Now
Now Roosevelt did a dumb thing by trying to bump the number up to 9.
basically he tried to pull the atomic solution to the Supreme Court, which is that A, the Supreme Court doesn't actually have a regulation of how big it's supposed to be.
It never
So
was.
theoretically,
Yeah, and he had such a mandate he thought he could get it through. What he didn't expect was his own fucking party would riot against him.
yeah, because they were like, this is really stupid. This
No,
doesn't make any sense.
they saw it as, holy shit, you're actually going to go for this.
And yeah,
To give
it
you his
failed
idea,
pretty
his
fast,
own
though.
vice president, John Nance Garner, basically told him, hell no. If you do
Was
this, I'm
Nance-
running
sorry,
against you.
was Garner the one that went to Tibet to search for Aryans, or was that another one of his vice presidents?
You're confusing him with the one that was originally going to be the president, if not for Truman.
Right.
I forget his
That
name.
guy is fantastic. I need to look up his name. Hold on.
He also was sympathetic to some aspects of socialism and communism. He wasn't a communist personally, but he understood where Marx came from. Interesting fella.
Yeah.
I forget his name.
Here we go. Henry A. Wallace, I think?
Yeah, Henry Wallace. There he is. He wasn't a commie. He did have leanings of democratic socialism, and he thought occasionally Marx could be applied in some respects. He actually thought the concept of the Soviet Union was kind of admirable, like this attempt to revitalize Russia. He was a dumb idiot who had weird beliefs, right?
Yeah. Okay. So
John
Henry
Nance
A.
Garner
Wallace,
is famous for saying the position of vice president ain't worth a warm cup of piss.
yeah, Garner was not very happy with being vice president.
He hated.
Wallace, though, is
it.
absolutely hilarious.
He was considered such a trash fire that they begged Roosevelt, please, you got to replace him with someone else.
Well, part of the reason why is that, mind you, he did a pretty decent speech in like 42.
Wallace wasn't a complete dump. He wouldn't have been a dumpster fire of a president. He would have just been a very
dumpster fire at
he
all.
would have been a very cursed one, though.
Yeah, he would have been a pretty cursed one. His main issue, I would say, is that he kind of had this weird position of like, how do I put this? Wallace just had a really weird personal life.
Oh yeah, he was basically the type of person you find in news for doing weird things.
So because here's the weird shit about it.
Like,
right?
if you told me Henry Wallace was found with like 5 orangutans and trying to teach them how to communicate to like the alien consciousness of Atlantis, people would believe it because that's the type of guy he was.
Yeah, his main he was really weird in terms of like he kind of was duped by the Soviets, but the really crazy shit, and I do mean the really fucking crazy shit, is his mystical bullshit. So he ended up joining the Theosophical Society,
which is actually that's why I mentioned Atlantis, because yeah, he was an early believer of it.
He arranged a federal expedition to the Gobi Desert, by the way.
Yep.
For his guru, who was Nicholas Roerich, a prominent Russian emigre.
Who was best well known
for
communicating to aliens.
Yes, that was trying to get drought-resistant grasses from the Gobi Desert. the funny thing is that Rorich was actually was nominated a couple times for the fucking Nobel Peace Prize.
He also was an
Um,
amateur painter.
yes, he was. He painted. Actually, his paintings aren't terrible.
No, no.
Uh,
Actually, funnily enough, his paintings were well known enough that Lovecraft himself mentioned him
yeah.
because he was
The
well
str
known for doing these Buddhist temples on these mountainsides.
Yeah, he had some very weird ones. It was very interesting. I wouldn't call it like stupid, but like mind you, his work was actually in mostly inside of like the 1920s that he was appointed for the Nobel Peace Prize. It was later on that he kind of went a little
He pulled
more nuts.
he pulled an Isaac Newton.
Yeah, his but yeah, so he was also he had to flee from the IRS, by the way. And the in general, Wallace was a weird guy, like a really weird guy.
By the way, rich and poor. Most modern histories of the Depression Dust Bowl focus on the experience of America's most vulnerable, seen as total disaster. The Depression wasn't business as usual. Many found. Yep. Got by. Let's see. They generally survived without significant harm to their standard of living.
Yeah, the middle class and the lower class got fucked. The rich really did not get fucked at all. They were able to continue just like normal because it turns out deflation doesn't really hit the rich that much. It just makes them richer.
Yeah, I mean,
Inflation actually hurts the rich the most because it devalues what they already have.
now the recommendation they have is a bit ham-fisted and kind of shit. The train roaring across the Prometheans past wealthy people staring out the windows eating good food might drive the. That's a little fucking ham-fisted. I'll be real with you. That's a little ham-fisted. I'll be real with you.
Yeah,
I would
they
say reads like some really early Detective Comics Batman to kind of get an idea on like early Gotham.
yeah. Yeah. The in any case, the
Where yeah, rich society
environmental
like they were the millionaires, the low-level millionaires were fucked.
yeah, because a lot of them had money in financial, which got
Financial
completely
or
screwed.
business, like they were starting up a business, like a fairly successful, and then the richest families, no, hell no, they were fine. Uh, History's not sure if the New Deal would have continued to work as intended. That is the thing. The second term, actually, he got in a lot of trouble because, oh yeah, the pissing match with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it
It
the New
destroyed a lot of
Deal.
his goodwill in his own party. It also gave the Republicans an actual thing to fight against. Because
Yeah,
before he tried that, no fucking shot.
yeah, but before that, there was zero fucking chance that.
And they were still not gonna. This was the party of Hoover. They're still not gonna, but it gave them an actually surprisingly good win in the midterms.
Yeah,
For them,
they
like
then
it was
immediately
expected to
pissed
still be
away.
bad.
Which they immediately then pissed away the next election.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
It was
It
quite.
didn't help. It didn't help. They brought in a former fucking Democrat to represent them.
Yeah.
Wendell Willkie. What the hell?
Oh God,
What were
Wilkie.
you thinking?
I don't even fucking know.
All I do know is that yeah, World War II, then World War II. Basically, if it wasn't for World War II, Franklin might not have actually pulled off his third win.
Yeah, the coming conflict inside of like
That
everybody
was the
knew that
closest he came to losing, and it was
it was
actually
in
in two
36,
ways.
right?
Not 36. He won very easily in 36.
It
40
was in
was when he
40.
came
Okay.
closest to losing
I thought it was
because
36 that he was the closest to losing, and then 40 was the one that he
Alf Landon
won
actually
pretty
was a
handily.
shockingly good pick to run against him.
Yeah.
It's just the Republicans forced him to essentially adopt positions he didn't have.
Yep.
Because
Welcome to
Landon, in his
the.
own words, thought the New Deal actually was kind of needed given how bad the situation was. This was Landon's point of view. The initial New Deal programs were critical. The problem is he's going too far with some of his programs. That was his initial point of view. Robert Taft, being the eternal salty bitch boy he is, fucking got a bunch of the other guys, because a lot of the Republicans at this point still are like, New Deal, the greatest devil ever. Essentially held him at gunpoint to attack
Communism.
the New
It's
Deal.
communism. It's communism to try to save capitalism.
Blink once to make sure that you're not captured, Alf Landon.
Yeah,
It
it's
actually
really funny.
absolutely shredded any chance he had of not,
Here's one of the
he
things I
wouldn't
would
have won,
argue.
but
I
basically
know.
his late September and October speeches that were held at gunpoint by the GOP essentially cratered their gains.
Here's one of the things I would argue is that the New Deal actually completely killed any chance of a socialist party rising in the United States.
Oh yeah, to give you an idea, in 1932, the Socialists actually got, I believe, 5.3% of the votes, and the Communist Party
Yeah.
even got over 1%.
Basically put, the entire reason that there is not a major socialist party in the United States, and Republicans should be incredibly thankful for that, by the way.
I don't know about that. I've seen what labor parties have done outside of the U.S.
That's what I mean. They should be incredibly thankful for that fact.
Sure about that.
What? Because labor sucks usually.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
That's why
They should be
they
annoyed.
should be incredibly thankful that they didn't end up accidentally creating an actual massive labor party, because that possibly could have happened if not for the New Deal.
Well, yeah, because it was the reformist take on what was essentially, it was supposed to be a workingman's party, but it leaned really conservative at this point, just because of the weird people in charge at that time. What'd you miss? A lot of economics, because we're talking about the Great Depression.
You can't escape the economics. But yeah, basically the New Deal completely changed the game for a lot of reasons, and arguably is the part of the reason why the United States was able to bounce back as hard as it did once the war ended, because all of a sudden you had a bunch of people with a lot of marketable skills on them,
some marketable
that had
vocational
money.
skills. On top of that, they were healthier because they were at least guaranteed a meal. On top of that, their kids at this point were starting to get better fed, because either they used their minimal earnings, or on top of that, the school lunches did something, because it was starting to be pushed, particularly in the Midwest, courtesy of people like McGovern.
Yeah, McGovern was huge. McGovern is probably the best president we never had in terms of like humanitarian. The man devoted his entire life to try to end world hunger.
Yeah, because he came from the Rocky States, which were among the most hard hit by the fucking Dust Bowl.
He came from the Dakotas, actually.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Well, the Dakotas aren't really rocky. I can attest to that.
I don't know, man. They're in that weird spot between the Midwest and the Rocky Mountains.
There's the Badlands out to the west of it, but a lot of it is just really flat, like really flat.
Either way, he had to deal with Dust Bowl shit. He saw how bad it got.
Well, a lot of it was also his time in Italy, where things were very bad.
South Italy was horrible.
Yeah.
Anywho. So he managed to get a lot of things passed, like minimal housing requirements,
a minimum
wage, lower hours to guarantee more people could work, because you couldn't just work the same smaller group to fucking death by threatening them. You had to actually hire more people, assholes.
Yeah. One of the crazy things is that the federal minimum wage was not a thing until the New Deal.
Yeah.
It
also
kind of
the
blows a lot of
plan.
minds. Yeah, the pension plan, which would become
unemployment assistance.
Yeah.
A lot of what would be known
bank securities.
Bank securities. Blue Sky Act, which means that you can't do stupid, dumb speculation games, which is why you didn't see this stuff until you get into unregulated markets like crypto.
Yeah. And again, if anybody's wondering, why is crypto so volatile? Why is crypto so awful? Why did I lose all of my money? It's an unregulated financial market.
Congratulations, you now know how the Great Depression came about, you stupid motherfucker.
You stupid motherfuckers. We've known this for over a century at this point. You don't fucking do this. And it happens every time. It happens. It's like fucking clockwork. Let's create an unregulated free market. Oh no, it implodes.
I mean, it's tempting, because you could totally make a fuckload of money, but you have to be the biggest scumbag in the world to do it. That's the thing people forget.
Yeah.
You have
It's
to be the
like,
biggest dickbag in the world. And don't get me wrong, there are issues like the banking sectors, since it's so restrictive in terms of numbers, basically collude with each other, which means that you have a lot of issues in terms of payment structures and shit. That's trash. That is trash. I understand why in that point of view. But I'd rather trust the weird cabal of weirdos, even if they have some very awful beliefs. Because you know what, the worst that they'll do? They'll try to force me to drink the Kool-Aid. My money won't go away to some fucking asshole in Romania.
yeah, it's not like my money will suddenly disappear.
Suddenly
Like,
disappear into Bulgaria because some vaguely pretend charismatic person tries to play the daddy for a bunch of people with mental issues and tells them to
also,
invest in their shitcoin, which is in the shape of a butt.
yeah. Oh God,
But yeah, the New
I can't
Deal
believe he got a.
essentially it revitalized the American economy, made sure less people starved to death, were in healthier
Yeah,
state. It did lead to some interesting fuck ups, like
yeah,
their 37 economic meltdown.
yeah. And again, a lot of that is like this is the first large-scale experiment with any of this sort of shit in the United States. There were going to be hiccups.
Partially
That
that,
when this,
well, it's partially that, but also loss in confidence in the government, fiat currency, took a bit of a hit in that regard. Also, a lot of the experimental, essentially government mandated work started to dry up because you can't. It's something China's starting to understand now with their,
you can't just make jobs. Yeah,
like, you can temporarily, but it's a temporary fix. You have to actually. So that's why
it's a
37
way to
ate shit.
kickstart. Yeah, it's a way to kickstart development,
It also didn't
basically.
help that he got into a war with the Supreme Court, which really fucked confidence in the American economy.
Yeah. The most interesting thing about this, though, as I'd say, is that the end of the Dust Bowl really comes in 1939, where finally,
A
finally weather patterns return to
long-term rain,
normal.
because it was a bit of a
Yeah,
drought period. That's the real thing that kicked it
that's the
off.
other thing too. It wasn't just that the topsoil was loose. It had recovered from being loose before. It's that it also suddenly hit a major dry spell.
Speaking of which, because of the way climate patterns have shifted, expect a dust bowl sometime this decade.
Yep,
It's likely,
it's
depending on
likely, but
depending on drought conditions.
it's likely, but it's not as likely as you'd think. The
Thanks to
major difference,
reforms.
thanks to basically everything that we've done, there's probably not going to be another Dust Bowl. And if it is a Dust Bowl, it's probably only going to happen in somewhere like Texas because, well, Texas.
Some dumb areas like Texas, parts of Iowa that are badly regulated, parts of the
Yeah.
Dakotas, because let's be fair,
Oh yeah. Well, the Dakotas, we've been in a drought for the last 20
Alberta,
fucking years, so like who gives a
Alberta.
shit? It's Alberta, just Alberta in general.
Anywho, yeah, the World War II happened, and then Europe collectively destroyed its own economy in a suicidal throat-cutting war against a literal maniac. Now,
Yeah.
unlike World War One, where it was done out of sheer fucking stupidity, this one actually was kind of needed,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But yeah, the economic demolition gave the U.S. a very strong 20-year monopoly.
Yeah, because everyone has to rebuild because everyone bombed the shit out of each other.
And that's
And
why the 50s seemed such hopeful things. As
that's why
long
the
as you
50s
weren't
seemed
as long as
as
you
long as
weren't the
you weren't.
following, a person who really liked the concept of making sure people weren't poor. So people who who preach social gospel like King. So you happen to be black, you happen
Just
to
generally not
be
white, a
not white in
woman.
general, or basically not the imagined ideal.
Yeah. Anybody who says we need to go back to the 50s can go fuck themselves. The 50s were awful, like genuinely awful.
It was financially beautiful, but
It was
socially
financially beautiful for
disgusting.
some. It was only financially beautiful for some because the cracks were starting to show. In
Well, the cracks were
uh,
papered over. You got to keep in mind that even like you're kind of, because even even those communities that were shat on, they still were in pretty good damn shape because of the economy in general.
yeah,
I'm gonna like to be fair, you gotta point that out. It's just you also had random psychos murder people and then put burning crosses on your fucking lawn. I'm
Yeah,
pointing that out.
and
Socially, it is goddamn toxic.
yeah, then we get kind of an interesting bit of time in this where it's like,
Yep, the rains come. We mentioned the supernatural. Here we go.
yeah, the supernatural is kind of
Took us
the
2 hours,
thing.
but this is a very dense kind of topic.
This is we're I don't think we're even mostly through this fucking section,
It's so
honestly.
good. This
Well,
entire
it's the time.
period.
The time is
It's such
interesting.
a good pick.
Yeah,
You just want the cool cars of the 50s. Oh yeah, the ones with no crumple zones that kill you
the ones
horribly.
no, yeah, the terrible car design that ended up
Goddamn
killing a bunch of
awful
people.
car mileage, batteries that die
Uh,
like in a year. And let's not forget my favorite part. Remember, the 50s is the era of the Ford Edsel. Remember that piece of shit?
the 50s is also the era of unregulated toxic waste dumps.
And leaded gasoline.
Let's not forget that.
I
It's
love
it's.
my brain damage.
I love my brain damage. I love my brain damage.
Hey, remember the civil rights protests about NASA? This was more of the 60s, but it's like people could spend $200 million to put a man on the moon, but they can't spend $2 million to prevent rats from eating my baby.
Yeah,
That
they got a
actually is
point.
one of my favorite signs that I've
They
ever
got a
seen from
point,
that.
but at the same time, it's like NASA's important. Come on.
Look. A few young black children have to starve to death in order to
Have to
send a
starve
white
to death
man
to
to the
be eaten by
moon.
rats in order to send a white man.
To send a
Okay,
white man to the moon so they could do the fucking Fortnite dance mocking the Russians.
this is very important.
It's super important.
We needed a T-pose upon the moon to assert our dominance over all other nations.
We're making the mother of all omelets here, Jack.
We gotta break a few eggs. By eggs, we mean everyone poor.
That's
Okay.
why William Proxmire, while he's often seen as the villain by people who love space programs, it's kind of admirable that he was willing to literally take a fight essentially against the culture of the time, because there was a big space craze. He literally fought
Space
a
was
war with
everything. Yeah.
it, saying you're wasting all this money that you could invest in things like subsidies and housing regulations. You
Like we don't need to
motherfuckers.
be. We don't need to be chasing the Soviets to the moon because we wanted to stroke our dicks.
He
Come
was a
on.
budget hawk that actually wanted to use the budget to aid people. That's something
Not just
admirable,
a
even if
budget.
you think
Yeah,
he's
not just a
wrong.
budget hawk that wants to cut everything,
That's why
which most budget
Proxmire is kind
hawks.
of that interesting fella.
Yeah. Again, most budget hawks want to just cut everything, which is retarded.
Meanwhile, he's like, no, you cut budget to basically put into public works and people do better.
Yeah. Because as it turns out, investing economically in the most vulnerable populations increases the economy overall.
That would be the least
Because
bad decade to return if that happened. Um,
oh god,
every one of them has their problems, but in the
the
90s,
'90s is probably the best decade America ever had.
yeah,
I
but
mean,
unless you're outside of America, in which case I'm so sorry, especially if you live in Eastern Europe.
hey, welcome
I don't
to
mean
this
Russia. I mean
wonderful
like if you're
place.
Polish or Bulgarian or oh fuck, I'm sorry, man,
I
if
was
you're
about to say,
Romanian. I'm so
I was about to
sorry if
say,
you're Romanian.
welcome to the Balkans. It's fun.
Please, I like yeah. Oh, and don't
Yeah,
forget, there's a famine in the '90s in Ethiopia. I'm sorry. I'm
there's
sorry.
yeah the '90s in Africa was
It's
very
beautiful
fun.
for us, but a good portion of the world. It's also good for China, actually, because that's
Yeah,
when they
China
were
actually had
starting
a
to do well. India
yeah
too.
China
India
finally
went
had
through a recent
yeah,
economic boom.
India did okay during the '90s. It wasn't great, but they did pretty well.
The
Aside
UK
from
was
the
finally
chemical
getting out of
leaks.
its death spiral.
Yeah. Uh, did Thatcher die in the '90s?
No,
Ah, then that would have been perfect.
no. Let's be fair. The unions asked for it. The unions asked for it because they were trying initially to do good, but their effort by doing good kind of fucked them in the long run.
Yeah, it's Thatcher. I can't not shit on Thatcher. Come on.
I am okay with shitting on Thatcher, even if I
I'm
think
part
that
Irish.
she.
I have to.
No, I'm of that mind because while I don't hate her, there's something you gotta. There's something kind of intrinsically. It's perfectly hateable because her first action when the unions began to revolt was good. Let them all starve.
Yeah.
And legitimately, she just crashed the economy. No survivors.
Yeah.
Just to guarantee, like, look, I don't care how long you strike, you eventually gotta starve to death, motherfucker.
Yeah. Very.
Like that is
Yeah.
sociopathic,
Yeah,
and
sociopathic. I think there was a fucking Saints Row joke about that. The perfect sociopathic organism has been found. What, a ghost, the clone of Margaret Thatcher, or something like that.
like,
Uh,
don't get me wrong, there's some things she did that were pretty good.
like shitting on Argentina. That was pretty great.
Yeah, she destroyed a dictatorship. You gotta admire that. It's just I can understand. Speaking of which, Supernatural. Speaking of the ghost
Supernatural.
of Margaret Thatcher.
Yay! Speaking of the ghost of Margaret Thatcher,
Or
if
just
if you
Margaret
if
Thatcher when she was alive, because she was a cryptid. Let's be fair.
she was obviously a fucking mummy or some shit.
No,
I don't know.
she was actually the identity of a demon.
Oh god, that makes too much sense. That makes way too much sense.
So yeah,
Anyway,
the Supernatural. No one was untouched. Even the Supernatural.
no one was having a great job. Well, a great
Vampires in
time.
particular, they both thrived and did not.
Yeah, vampires had an interesting time.
Because on the bright
The
side, more people were coming to the cities. On bad side, crime was so bad, mobsters would just occasionally wipe out a vampire, like
yeah,
during like a big fucking fight. Just like I don't care if you got celerity, you're getting dosed with fucking 45 caliber bullets.
yep. And on top of that, werewolves are actually doing pretty okay. Like
They're
not
doing
great, but
okay.
okay.
They're doing okay. The rural areas were, in a lot of ways, the Dust Bowl kind of fucked them over too because,
The
well,
spirit ecology of these places probably went to absolute goddamn shit.
I mean, it gave them things to hunt at least, so it wasn't all bad.
Yeah. Then then you have changelings who are looking at the chain gangs, the migrants, the
The
hobos, looking for
changelings were like
people they know.
finally places that I can belong.
Yes, places to belong.
But for
Chain
Prometheans,
gangs.
though, it was Shitsville.
Yeah.
It's always Shitsville, but this was
Mind
more
you, yeah,
Shitsville than
this was
normal.
especially Shitsville. The wonderful thing about Promethean the Created is they sum this up in one line, and I think this is the best line about Promethean ever written by Onyx Path. Promethean the Created is a game about misery.
Yeah, it kind of
it's,
is.
it's on the page of the milestones, like under the pill. It's like this is the most apt description of Promethean of all time. It is a game about misery. It is a game about being a miserable excuse for a human being trying to
Wait,
understand.
wait. So does that mean the Lord of the Rings Gollum game, the game of all time, the game, not
Yeah,
greatest, just the game? Does that mean Gollum's a fucking Promethean?
I mean, Gollum is a decent Promethean simulator, I guess.
It's Promethean Simulator.
I mean,
If you
it's terrible.
interpret it as a Promethean Simulator, it merely goes from the worst thing ever made to awful.
Yeah.
Come on. Gollum has to become like the new Morbius. We need to make it the
No,
highest.
Morbius is genuinely funny because it's like and then he said it's Morbin time and Morbin all over them, which never happened in the
No,
movie.
but you didn't see
Which
Gollum argue with himself. That's so
Gollum
dumb.
arguing but Gollum arguing with himself is a neat mechanical idea. They just fucked up.
There's also the bit where where he just like dies to random things he touches.
Yeah,
You play a repulsive,
that
pathetic shit, and
that
it
sounds
shows in the
yeah
game.
yeah. Anyway, as long as in any case, as long as the Prometheans
Your pilgrims
are
in the
moved,
time of dust.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
which
here's
is
your
where we go.
milestones. Yeah.
It's right there. Witness one of take advantage of the ecological disaster to settle in place for a while, survive a black blizzard, scavenge the remains of a completely depopulated community. help people out, settle long enough for the effects to be noticeable, even despite a fucking
Because here's the thing, yeah, the Dust Bowl's bad, but eventually the wasteland will happen, even in the crappiest of places.
yeah, like the wasteland is even worse. The really fun bit about all this too is that they talk about that the wasteland is its least cerebral, most visceral theme of this, because you welcome to the fact that you are looking at a man-made wasteland all around you in the Dust Bowl. Like
Yeah, the wasteland and a handful of dust. Yeah, it's just
you you're seeing the what humans can do to the world around them. Like let's be fair, and it's the same thing you're doing by staying in one place.
yeah. Because here's the thing, like because it's so shit, it takes a lot longer for your wasteland to, especially if you're like a Frankenstein, because theirs is of the aspect of fire. Theirs
Yeah,
causes it to just dry out more. Like you're not gonna really notice any problems.
for a while, no. Then we get some other like milestones which are fun, which is forgive humans, witness more secure humans taking advantage of the poor migrants, which makes sense, honestly. Because that is a very human thing to do.
No, the thing is, they're kind of going with the wealthier, more secure humans. Like it's a little bit of that class conscious commentary. You know what I'm envisioning instead? The like a caricature of P.T. Barnum abusing
That's
the
kind of
shit
what
out of
I'm
his
thinking.
psycho. Yeah, so
That's kind of what I'm thinking, or like
or
the
like the farmhands from Of Mice and Men literally
yeah,
abusing the poor mentally handicapped man and
yeah,
basically
that's kind of
fucking
what
him
I
out of
was
his
thinking.
money.
Yeah, that's basically what I was thinking that they're trying to get across here.
Like I think that's what they're more shooting for. Yeah.
Yeah. Speak to humans have given up hope, convince humans to do stuff, help humans survive the consequences of the Dust Bowl, things like that, which makes sense. As they talk about like becoming human, where it's like being a human, actually for a Promethean is at this point not a great idea because being human means you suddenly have to worry about things like food
Because with
and
Prometheans, they can eat, they can get minimal amounts of Aza, like feed their fire by doing it a little bit.
they can literally just eat a chair and they're fine.
Yeah, that's what they do. And depending on what sources, like if you're a Frankenstein, oh, you just plug yourself into an electrical socket. There you go, you're fine.
Yeah. Well, there's not a lot of electricity running at this time, but still.
I mean, if you're like
The
working in the docks of San Francisco,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Then they talk about like why would you want to be human when you're seeing the human suffering around them that's so awful. But then there's others that realize, wait a minute,
they
I
actually,
can
I cannot. This is something we both understand. Like humans can experience what we do.
yeah, there's also
Like it makes them
I
realize
can
that the quest to being human, like it's not as insurmountable because you're seeing their misery and you know how that feels.
they also make a point that being a
Empathy,
Promethean
sympathy.
and yeah, empathy and sympathy is a very important theme for Prometheans in this time because it's like you might devote yourself to helping humans, but that's a problem, right? If you get stuck on that for too long, you're losing the path.
Because you just essentially put it on a pedestal you can't reach.
Yeah. And they talk about that a little bit here, which is a really good thing to do. It's which is like, yes, you are able to do things humans cannot. Like you can endure nearly any ending punishment. Why not work so that others can save their strength? Why not stand in a soup kitchen and give most of your food to someone else? Why not do all these things? And it's like, yeah, it's a great thing to do, but it entangles you in the lives of people that you will harm. It's just how it is.
And yes, you're alone on the road. They mentioned the hobo code. Basically, hobo marks and things
Yeah,
become the
Prometheans exploited
Promethean
those. Yeah.
language. Yeah.
They also talk about like that if you're in a male body as a Promethean, because Prometheans are weird, right? Prometheans can legitimately have bodies that don't look like anything else and are barely recognizable as human. So you get this kind of like
Yeah, they
the,
mentioned it a bit because early Promethean first edition went a little bit harder on this than others because which I get it, and it's not as obnoxious as it could be, but it's like, okay, I get it. I get it. Because at the
I
end of the
get it.
day, it's a Frankenstein. A Frankenstein monster can be made out of anything. Like
Yeah.
if you build an unfleshed, which is the Promethean that's actually like a robot that's gained awareness and a mimic
Yeah.
soul, I mean, it could be a giant fucking skeleton robot murder machine. You might have accidentally created like Quadraxis from Mexroid, this fucking spider monster thing, right?
Yeah.
It can identify itself as a girl or a boy.
Are you gonna tell it? Are you gonna tell an Apache assault helicopter it cannot
An Apache
be
assault helicopter
pre-exist
that's
this?
gained a soul, like literally the ship soul from like One Piece. That could be a Promethean concept.
And are you going to tell it cannot be the little girl?
Especially
I would
since one
not.
of the things with Promethean is identity, so
Yeah, like
it can get
because
away with it. Where in another setting, that would be so fucking
the
ham-fisted
thing
it
is that
hurts.
because the thing is when they become human, they'd probably take the form that they identify as. Like that's the weird thing about Prometheans is that you might end up with that sort of thing, or if it goes wrong, you might end
Like
up as
in
like
another book, it would be ham-fisted, and it sometimes is. Like in first edition, it was a little more ham-fisted than it was in second.
second edition really nails the fact that these are not humans. The idea of gender is legitimately a human concept, right?
Well, they make a point to just state up front, like, remember what you are. You, like, at your best, you're the mutilated remains of a corpse that might have been one gender.
Yeah, male or female or whatever else. You might be made up of three different corpses from three different individuals, and
Or
only
you're maybe not be made out of anything at all. You're literally just inanimate
well, yeah, you
objects
are
stitched
literally a
together.
clay man with no dick. Like, what do you identify as if you have like that? Like, are you a man because you were made in
Or
the shape of a man?
you're the sand, or like the scene from Spider-Man. I love that scene of
Yeah,
Spider-Man 3 where Sandman reform. You form in a freak accident as an extempore as like a Sandman.
yeah,
Well, sand figure, like humanoid figure. You don't know what the fuck you are at that point.
exactly.
So
Like
you can get away with it in another setting. I would say it's ham-fisted and shit.
in this, it
And,
makes
and the weird neo pronouns
100%
still
sense.
make my skin crawl, but the concept as it stands makes sense.
Yeah, because again, it's like, how do you define?
Like, I ain't gonna use the terms like Zer, but you can use totally they. And unironically,
They
if you
it,
wanted to play non-binary Frankenstein, sure, because you're made out of like 5 people.
like what do you identify as? Do you identify as what your brain came from? Do you identify as what your main body contributor
Do you
was?
do
Like what?
biological component consistency, like 58% male?
Yeah,
Like, do you
but
go that way? Like, it's
what
up
about your
to,
sexual organs if you have any,
because that's the
right?
thing. That's optional.
Yeah, like
I just have to point that
it's
out because that's like, I think that might be a partial sticking point for Promethean as well, because it's a little more obvious with that kind of
it
marketing.
is, but it makes fucking sense.
Yeah, that's the
That's
thing.
the
It
thing.
makes sense. And in another book, I would groan too, but it's just you're you're an Apache attack helicopter. What do you
You,
even
you,
know?
what like you are trying to become human. Choosing your sexual and
You're
gender
the
identity
AI.
is part of that.
You're the AI in Steven
Yeah,
Spielberg's AI flying that airplane.
yeah,
Step right up. Yeah, because Prometheans usually have, depending on which lineage, each of them tend to have some noteworthy, striking features. Because, well, the glamour is good, but it doesn't hide everything perfectly.
yeah. Person
This
with
is most
electrodactyly
particularly
and like
known
all
for
this.
like, I mean, all of them each have a role. Like a Frankenstein would be part of the sideshow. A Tammuz might be one of the strongmen or strong
Yeah.
women. A Galatean
Siren is
could make
also
an Osiren could also do that, like where it's like I swallow swords and shit because like I have
egalitarian
no.
would be like step right up, come see the freaks.
Hmm. And
Uh,
the Olgin would be the mystic card reader who's like, I can see the
yeah,
fates and ley lines of the spirits.
yeah. A Promethean that was yet to develop an instinctive sense of what is socially appropriate could be a gifted geek or wild man, menacing the crowd and biting the heads off of chickens.
Oh yeah, yeah. You could be any weirdo and it's fine.
Yeah, that's what's great about this. The idea of a traveling carnival of Prometheans sounds really fun.
And yeah, you could be the
Uh,
roustabouts. You could just literally be the workers who set up the tent poles and stuff.
yeah, they actually talk about that as one of the plot seeds, where there is a actual Ismail is originally a geek that has created a unique act. He's actually an extempore, and the founder of the lineage that is featured in this book as the thing where it's like the carnival that we've got here is actually exploiting the Prometheans, which is really fun.
I like how you can use your transmutations and merits and other things to just amaze the crowd.
Yeah, like this is a really fun take on all of this. I like it a lot. I really do.
And yeah, here's some hobo scratchings. Essentially, just again to point out that this is where the Promethean signs come from.
Right.
Wait, do wastelands stack if you have different lineages in a group? Actually, they take
Yes,
longer to form, but when
they
it
do stack
does, it
though.
gets a lot worse.
They do stack, but it does take longer for them to form. It's
Basically,
really
because
funny.
it counters out. It counters out partially. It's just it slowly builds, and then when it starts going, it is every aspect. Frankensteins tend to cause hot and dry. Tammuz tend to poison the soil and make it gluey and awful. The Galateans cause a cold, like this cold to seep in. Same with Osirans.
Well, the
Each of them
actually
have their own
the
variant. Yeah,
Galatan. Well, the Galatans also just make everyone fucking nuts
nuts.
around them.
Well, all of them do in their own way. Frankenstein's invite rage. Galateans invite, like a serial killer might spot up because they become obsessed with like one particular type of
Yeah.
person that they stalk and kill.
So so the fun here is that
And,
they
and
go in.
the Olgan, they cause literal spirit breakthrough outbreaks
Yeah.
because they
So they
thin the barrier. They thin the
yeah.
gateway.
So this is the Chronicle Seed, which is the idea of a Promethean traveling carnival, and they go through this
Yep, the
pretty well.
created
There's a
man.
lot of pages of this. Let's get to like page like
Extempore
480.
without a creator, controlled by the
Yeah.
power of nature. The Hollow, which we'll go into detail.
Yeah.
And
And
they go
then
into detail. Like, this is just the adventure draw. It gives you all of the people. This could be a genuine, real fun thing for you. And also,
yeah.
some of them, like Crocodile Jack, you could totally make a deviant as well.
Yeah, they do some fun stuff where it's like is you can do some wonderful things with this with like a deviant Promethean combo game for this era if you're doing carnies.
Yep,
I
Ishmael
I don't
Hawker doesn't know he's really the first person to die as a result of the Dust Bowl. Doesn't really know his body.
yeah,
He's a Hollow. What's a Hollow? Well,
the new lineage, yeah. So they go
here's the guy who abuses him.
hmm
He had his hand get mutilated. Also, I find it interesting. Oh, German immigrants, Pennsylvania. Okay.
hmm
Several fortunes isn't okay. Blah blah blah. Silver tongue, the awful person, essentially.
yeah.
Here we go. Chronicles of Darkness itself. I want to read this because
These
it
are
gives you
fun.
vampires, like any scavengers, feed well if carefully on displaced, disempowered populace. Blood is plentiful, but so is disease, malnourishment, alcoholism, and opiate abuse. I came up with the concept of a bloodline of vampires that gain their power through alcoholism. This could be a good
That's
time for them to appear.
yeah. There's also this wonderful one here,
Sin
which
Eaters
is
also are kind of busy because
yeah,
suicide rates are high. Death by starvation has upticked.
and so is
The
death by
restless dead,
violence.
yeah, the restless dead walk, and this is their job to put them to
Yeah.
sleep. Werewolves, they ain't happy with the dust storms because on some level, it's not really spirits that's doing it, but the antics have awakened the spirit realm, so they have to take care of that shit. And the gentry
hmm
are loving this time because all of
Oh
these
yeah,
people
there's
you
so
can
many
disappear.
displaced people. Yeah, you can just disappear them.
So that's not good. The mages are annoyed, mainly because the Dust Bowl actually has some magical aspect to it. It in itself was caused by a man-made thing, but its effects basically caused a magical haywire. The demons are like, this is a change in society. Let's see what we can exploit from this. And beasts are like, oh yes, look at all of these people I can destroy for my own gratification because I was written by an abuser. Yes, yes, torment the weak and make them want to end it all. Because fuck beast. And last but not least, hunters are going. Yeah, there's some weird ooga booga shit going on because of this. The Hollow. Here we go. Everything had turned to dust. The land, the sky, and the hopes and ambitions of men. All dust. The Hollow are Prometheans that have risen from that dust. They do not come to wallow in despair. They are creatures of intensity. They shall rebuild the world, starting with themselves, or grind themselves back from whence they came. So to make one of these, you have to find a person who's died of starvation. Hunger or thirst work, but despair also works. They have to make sure the corpse is even emptier than it was by salting it. You mummify it, basically. And then you have to anoint it with dust to prepare the corpse. To imbue it with divine fire, you have to essentially put some of your fire into a drop of water, and that serves as its hope. They are empty and they have a deep hunger. The things that they basically they try to suck interaction and happiness from others around them because
Yeah.
they themselves feel empty inside.
I do like their talk about like the fact is that usually Prometheans only last around 100 or 200 years if they don't achieve the pilgrimage because they'll just burn out, right?
Yep.
So you've got some weird edge cases where it's like there could be some Prometheans, hollows still around, or legacy creations of hollows, for example.
And since they
Uh,
wander around so much, remember famines are still pretty common. I would say the hollow lineage probably you won't find them in the Americas too much no more, but you will probably find them still hanging out in Africa.
yeah, you almost certainly will.
So I would say if you want, you can actually keep these lineages around, but they would be native to areas that tend to experience somewhat regular famine.
Yeah, they'd be kind of in a somewhat different area now. They'd have either migrated or they'd just be somewhere else.
Because
The
this one, their creation, it's not like the Zeka, which are very specialized and probably will fade out eventually. These ones
Yeah,
can
there's just
probably linger.
not only linger but have a sense to linger, right?
Yeah. And the first of the Hollows is Ishmael, who is essentially an extempore that created a lineage. They're known as the skeletons and beggars. They literally look like emaciated corpse. It's kind of horrifying.
Yeah, it's
Their
yeah,
humor is sanguine and melancholic. They're essentially bipolar,
yeah.
which
The
that's actually kind of neat. Like this is a
yeah,
really cool lineage.
this
I
is a
like
really
this.
cool lineage. They cover another one, I think,
They
in a
have
few other
earth and
bits.
air,
Yeah,
hunger, and their refinements. They tend to be angry and hungry at first, so they tend to start with torment.
yeah,
After that, they very commonly go into copper, iron, and gold
yeah.
because they
The fun
tend
thing
to
is that
stalk humans a lot.
yeah, the fun thing they talk about is that their disfigurements uniquely they're so dried out they can't really rot like normal corpse style Prometheans because there's just no water left in them.
Yeah, so they don't have to worry about that. Although if their bodies get broken apart, that's the thing
That's
they have to worry
painful.
about.
Yeah, they kind of do some interesting
Their big thing is
little
hunger, and they have thing. They even come up with the things like there's pyros.
yeah. There's their pyros, but I do like the one that they talk about here, which is their. That's the thing. The few hollows that survive the rains without becoming human are almost all trapped in an endless broken pilgrimage. The ritual that creates new hollows stops working once the rains start falling. It
Oh,
doesn't create for me.
they're creatures of the Dust Bowl, which I'm not the biggest fan of that.
They could. It's just that they're kind of in a weird space. Like who knows what happened to them is kind of their thing. They're not really a legacy anymore, I guess you could say,
I'm not
or
a
a
fan of
lineage.
that since it's such an interesting concept.
It is, but I can understand why they did it because it's a very unique area, Promethean.
Fair, I just Oh, and if you're wondering, they have their own Pandorians. Here they are, the Dust Devil.
Yeah,
It rips itself apart and becomes essentially living whirlwinds.
yeah. Dust Devils are just inconsistent.
They don't have an attention span to capture for consumption. They just prefer to eat, fill, and wander off.
Dust
Uh,
Devils,
they're
I like
fascinated
it.
by
They were
humans.
they're are fascinated by humans. they're inconsistent and capricious, and they'll digest ghosts or whatever else, which is kind of neat. The thing is, their weakness is water.
That's oh, it's like signs.
Yeah, they're literally the aliens from Signs. A housewife with a housewife with a pail of soapy water can
And yeah, I like how they
end them.
become subliminal if they eat ghosts. That's cute.
Yeah, they're also warded off by healthy vegetation. So a branch, for example, will like that you broke off recently from a tree will absolutely fucking murder them. And dust devils really have nowhere to go after the Dust Bowl. Agriculture, of course, kind of kills them, and with the return of that, and plus rain, there they go. There's maybe a couple more left, but the thing is, without more hollows, you don't get more dust devils. This one's creepy though. The Fort Cobb Devil.
It's pretty good
The
art. I
Fort
like
Cobb
it.
Devil. The Fort Cobb Devil was born on the first rise over the Dust Bowl and has been tormenting the town ever since. The strange black man was Olgan Promethean, which the Fort Cobb Devil tricked into a cave and trapped in with a carefully orchestrated cave-in. The uh, the thing is that it's eating his pyros and all that, and creating a wasteland that draws more spirits and ghosts that he then eats as well. So doubling up. When it pulls itself together into a body, it is roughly the size of a large toddler with a raven's skull and a doll's head in its chest.
Which you can see.
Animal teeth form its fingers, and plant roots as well, which is also really creepy.
It also just repeats words like a parrot.
Yeah, I like it. It's fun.
I like it a lot. Like, here's the thing. I genuinely think if you wanted, you could bring the Hollows as a lineage, and
Oh
it
yeah,
wouldn't
no,
be
it's
bullshit. I like
no
that.
problem to do it. They just
I like
canonically have
it.
died out. You know, they also added in a couple of extra powers for them, which
And
is
put in quotes canon, but you can just again, it's
yeah,
a toolkit setting.
yeah. They talk about a few other things like
Withering touch, which is pretty nasty.
yeah, they add a couple of
They
story
can eat
hooks as well,
ghosts.
and then they add in a couple of other weird things you might run into,
The
which is Mr.
traveling
Dusk.
salesman. He's a Kajmal,
Possibly.
or possibly a Fae, or even maybe a demon or an angel.
And who knows?
Man and truck merge into one horrifying whole. Mr. Dusk's true form is a humanoid torso emerging from the neck of a truck-sized reptilian body with slick black scales. 6 restless wings emerge from its back, moving on constantly even when at rest. The human body atop the neck is unmistakably Mr. Dusk's, but young and hale rather than old and withered, and absolutely hairless. It gazes into the heart of mortals and sees the cruelties and venality there.
And relishes the opportunity to punish them. It then
This is basically anything you fucking want.
yeah, this is actually pretty cool.
Really cool.
The traits are given for the being's true form. He
And here's the
prefers
thing,
to
it
be
has Numina, which is something you don't usually see outside of like fucking Kajmals
ghosts and
and
spirits and
ghosts and
Krajmals,
shit.
yeah.
So you don't really know what the hell it is.
Yeah, they go
And
of
on
course
top of that,
into
he's like a you know those old horror stories where the devil sets up a shop and gives you what you think you need, but it turns
that's
out
what he
that
does, yeah.
that's his operating, and I love it. It's well done. Very well done. I love that they kind of because that type of story became really popular in the 30s. So
Yeah.
I love it.
And of course for literature they give vice
Steinbeck,
men,
yeah,
and
you have to use Steinbeck.
if you haven't read them since high school, give them a look or watch the movies. They go with like a couple of,
Out of the
literature
Dust is the
and
good one.
out of the dust. Oh brother, where art thou? They
Oh,
say
Brother,
is well
We're Out
lighter.
There is pretty darn good.
Yeah, that's actually kind of good for a Promethean game as inspiration when you think about it too.
Hmm. And they also use Carnival because again,
Yeah,
it uses traditionally stuff like there's a lot of carny aspects to it. God, this was such a good book. This was such a good setting. And if you're
It
wondering
is a
what the
great
next one
setting.
is,
The next one is the one where it's like, why the fuck did they make
the
this
next one is 1950s New Zealand.
for Geist the Sin Eaters
You wouldn't
of all
think that
things?
looking at this image, but that's what it is.
Yeah, it. And here's the thing.
God's own country.
Here's the thing. It's not a bad setting.
We'll get into it next time. Not next time this thing, but like when we next cover Dark Eras. So overall, I have to say this has probably been my number. Like not probably. This is my favorite.
Yeah, it is a great setting, and they do a good job of giving you every tool you need to actually portray it properly. Um,
To give you an idea, in order, I think it's because it's been a while since I've given. There's a lot of really good ones. I Three Kingdoms era Changeling and Three Kingdoms era Geist was well done.
yeah,
That one's really cool. Edo period Hunter is also really fucking good.
Edo period Hunter and the
And Doubting
colonial
Souls,
New
which is
England.
its
Yeah,
colonial one.
colonial New England Hunter is just fantastic. Like they nailed that one.
Those were home runs. Actually, let's just. There's also Grug Mage, obviously.
Grug Mage is fun. The Aztec, the Skin
The
Dancers one
Aztec.
was really good.
Okay, in this order. Number one has to go to Handful of Dust. Number two, for me, it's a hard one, but I would say After the Fall. That's the demon one for
The Demon one in
Constantinople.
Constantinople, because that is a fantastic one too.
And after that, I'd either go with Fallen Blossoms or Doubting Souls, which are your two hunter ones they did.
Yeah,
All
I
of them except arguably two the strongest, and even then that was just more how it was formatted, have been at
yeah.
worst good.
Yeah, like this book is like, if you need to, like, as an introduction to Chronicles from a broad perspective, it's hard to get a better book
It
for it,
gives you great
honestly.
ideas for things like, think about it. I don't think people would have come up with the idea of doing Carney Prometheans without a handful of dust.
Well, it makes so much fucking sense when you start to think about it, because there already were in Old World of Darkness, you had like the a traveling carnival from with vampires and stuff like that, and there's sort of that as well in Midnight Roads, which is a uh, New World of Darkness book that was released about, well, road travel, which it's a weird book. I've got a copy of it. I don't call it terrible, but I also don't call it good either. It
Oh,
it,
it's
it
like me with
exists.
two of the strongest, and I'd also say Wolf and Reagan because the Wolf and Reagan,
The
Ronald
Wolf and
Reagan
Reagan,
fights.
yeah,
He has
like
to fight
no,
a werewolf.
no. That the Wolf and Reagan is President Ronald Reagan getting railed by a man in a wolf suit at a furry convention. That's the Wolf in Reagan.
No, Ronald Reagan was actually a werewolf all along.
That explained nothing at all. So
It
no,
explains
he
nothing.
was not.
It's not like the Iron Lady as a demon.
It's not like the Iron Lady being a demon. Yeah, like that makes absolutely the most fucking sense of all time. But no, yeah, like
You heard it first. Maggie Thatcher, after using Oswald Mosley to kill John F. Kennedy, assumed the identity of some lady who was owned a small business chain of grocery stores to destroy the United Kingdom's economy.
yeah,
I mean, its economy was basically dead at that point anyway, so it's
yeah, it
like,
was.
why not just finish the job?
Why not? Either that or she's a god machine plot angel,
A
whatever.
God
Fuck it.
Machine plot just to T-pose to assert dominance over Argentina.
Over Britannia, yeah. The Falkland Islands were legitimately needed bloodshed on them in a massive scale to create an occult matrix, so the god machine arranged the Falklands War. Why not?
It was designed to actually stabilize the South American nations so that they could actually build reliable infrastructure. There you go. There's your
There you go.
stupid plot.
There's your
There's your
stupid fucking
stupid
plot for Demon in the Falkland Islands or whatever. I don't
Demon in the
care.
Falkland Islands, as written from the point of view of a violently pissed, eternally raging laborite that is still angry at the Iron Lady.
I think, look,
I mean, if done well, it'd be hilarious, but it's also
Yeah,
like this is essentially like the time they decided to make, BOP, the Brazilian police force that casually
yeah,
murders people because they have a force of violence. That's up there.
almost as bad as Minneapolis PD. Almost as bad.
No, no, you can't even compare it to BOP, dude.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
I'm not sure. I wasn't sure about it.
No, I'm joking. The Justice Department recently released their report on the practices within MPD after a 2-year investigation. It's
But yeah, the
wow.
Wolf and Reagan. No, the Wolf and Raven. Not Ronald Reagan, Werewolf Hunter.
Yeah,
It is. That one is probably my second least favorite, just because I don't give a shit about Brian Boru. I don't give a rotten fucking shit about
yeah.
Brian Boru
It picks a weird
and that
period
random
of the
battle
Viking
in
Age.
Ireland in 992. I don't give a fucking crap about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We know, we know. It still has some of the best art in the book because it's so stupid.
It's so cheap.
It's so cheap. Yeah, like
But
the one.
like I said, I think next week I promised it would be autistic analysis. So
Yes, you did.
if the
Which
diopsid is free from working on in his hive task, that'll be what we do. If he is unable to, do not worry, I have a plan.
that plan is probably not more Dark Eras,
Oh no,
but
the plan is just to finish Rift Part 2 if the
oh
diopsid
yeah,
cannot
if
leave his hive.
if IMSID is available.
Might not be. Otherwise, I don't know. I got a bunch of random books.
Yeah, I mean, we could bring up bunnies and burrows of all fucking things if we had to.
Yeah, yeah, we got stuff, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, don't worry about
So
that.
have
But
a
yeah,
nice
like,
night, and hey, we managed to keep it just barely under 3 hours, which is quite fucking impressive given how much we talked about this topic.
and well, not about this topic. We went off on fucking tangents, man. But
That's
that's
fine.
lore rambles. That's what we do.
So, like I said, next week, if the diopsid is available, autistic analysis. Otherwise, it's going to be some other book, most likely Rifts, if we have the opportunity. If not, don't worry. I can find another book. We got options. It's okay. So have an excellent night, everyone.